Alrighty, welcome to the 77th edition of Before the Battle. My name is Nick Baldwin of BloodyElbow.com. I'm joined as always by Jed Meshew from MMAfighting.com and Wesley Riddle from MMAsucker.com. Jed, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing good, man. How about you?
I am not too bad. Wesley Riddle, it's been a little bit. You missed last week. That was UFC on Fox 25, Weidman versus Gastelum. So last time we spoke was, of course, just ahead of Santiago Ponzinibbio's upset over Gunnar Nelson. What's going on? How are you?
Pretty good. I'm glad to be back. I actually just finished my summer school class today, a few hours ago, and now I can enjoy the next month I have before I start my last semester or 2 semesters of college. So maybe I'll have some more time to do some breakdowns and hang out with you guys.
Excellent.
Nicholas, yes. I lied to you. I lied to you when you asked me a straight question, how am I doing? I told you a great big lie because I said I was doing okay. But what I'm actually doing is great because if you'll recall last week when it was just you and I, when we were unceremoniously abandoned by our compatriot here, Wes Riddle, I told you.
Who you called a coward.
Exactly.
There was something about that. I think
the coward Wes Riddle didn't show up because he didn't want to give me my due and propers for being not only the picks champion, but also the DraftKings champion. But now he's back here to give me the propers from last week like he should have, and from this week, because that's right, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, two-time, the king is back. Give me all the belts. Just give them all to me.
I'll give you the props, man. But who did you picked in the main event? Ponzinibbio, right?
Yes, I did.
Did you thank Ponzinibbio for those 3 eye pokes?
I don't know what you're talking about. All I saw was a win in like 63 seconds.
Hey, to be honest, all that I saw, he smoked him, and it was awesome to watch because I kind of love when I think a guy's going to win and that guy gets starched, to be honest. I think that's like just it shocks me, but in a cool way. It's unexpected.
He did smoke him, and we talked about it last week, Nick and I. But unfortunately for you, he let Gunny land 1 too many strikes, and you lost to Nick by 0.5 points.
No. I lost to Wes. No, it was the other way around.
Are you certain?
I am very certain.
Oh, well, then he smoked him exactly right for you.
I got the 1 point I needed. So I'm thankful for Gunny for landing 1 punch.
No, actually 4 to be precise.
4 in total. Props to Gunny for hanging in there for 60 seconds.
All right, well, Jed, you're claiming you're the champ. You're 2 weeks in a row. I had a feeling, or I was thinking we were tied with something. Is that not the case?
I still am the champ. I mean, I feel like,
all right, well,
like
I get
UFC belt situation. A draw doesn't beat the champion. Like, here I am. I had the belt the week before. You and I both finished 8-5 on picks.
You retained it.
So I retained my title with a draw. You can hope for a Stephen Thompson style beg for a rematch. Maybe I'll deign to give it to you. But we all know who's carrying home the 12 pounds of gold. It's this guy. This guy right here. And if we needed a tiebreaker, mind you, let's go to the DraftKings scoreboard. It was a bad week for y'all. I'm going to shoot you straight at 568 points. You're champion by a goddamn landslide. This guy, once again, I'm back in my groove. I'm back to my winning ways. I don't expect it to stop anytime soon. Tag along if you're following the show, guys. Second place, Nick, you put up I don't want to call it a good fight, but you put up some sort of a fight. 392 points, a full 170 points almost behind me. And Wes, it was a rough go for you. You had Kelleher, who did almost nothing for you, and he really tanked your score. 312 points for Wes Riddle. Honestly, that was probably the best DraftKings team I've ever had. Everybody did a lot of work except for Jean Vellante, and I'm okay taking a flyer on Jean Vellante to knock out the notoriously chinny Pat Cummins. As far as picks go, I said you and I tied, Nick. We tied at 8-5. I missed Johnson, Kelleher, LaFleur, Vellante, and Bermudez. Nick, you missed Johnson, Kelleher, Lyman Good, Vellante, and Kelvin Gastelum. And Wes, you were pretty close, 7-6. You missed Johnson, Kelleher, Good, Vellante, Bermudez, and Gastelum. So you missed all of the ones that me and Nick missed individually. You were just on the wrong side of all the times we differentiated. So As far as bonuses, your performance bonus last weekend were Albini and Oliveira. Fight of the night was Good Santos, and none of us got shit. We're all still really bad at picking bonuses.
Well, Jed, I'll give you this one. It was a draw, but unlike Tyron Woodley versus Stephen Thompson 2 back in March, the rematch will not go that way. It'll be exciting. It won't be boring like Woodley Thompson 2, and it will go in the guy who should have won the first time around, Stephen Thompson. That's me. It'll go back to me. I will be the picks champion come Sunday morning.
I'm about that DraftKings anyway. I don't give a fuck about a pick.
All right, well, DraftKings, I mean, honestly, I'm super solid on my DraftKings team this week. Most of the time, I have to throw in a couple dogs where it's just, got to get those favorites on, so just throw away a couple. But this one is taking me home to the bank. Anyways.
Well, I'm not feeling confident yet. I'm still trying to work on my team while we do this.
Yeah, show. Exactly. You haven't even gone your team yet. I'm prepared.
I'm coming up with air right now.
Whatever. All right. UFC 214, biggest card of the year. I know, Jed, we spoke on my podcast / kind of your podcast, the MMA Circus, the other night, which was up yesterday. I'll plug that at the end. You are not that excited for this card. You're looking forward to it in general, but you don't really feel like it's going to live up to expectations. We're going to see the best, super great fights. You just don't really feel the hype per se. I want to go, and Wes, what do you sort of think? I mean, is this highly anticipated for you? Are you stoked for Jones, Cormier 2, and the rest of the, 2 other title fights, Cerrone, Lawler on the card, Manua, and the mystery of Volkan Ozdemir? Are you excited, or are you kind of like Jed, where you're not sure, how good the fights really will be?
I'm definitely looking forward to it. I like the fact that there's 3 title fights. I think it's one of the better pay-per-views that we've seen of the year. There's some decent fights that we have in the prelims, especially the main event. Ricardo Lamas, Jason Knight down there. Then again, some of the fights aren't really the best when you get a little lower on the card, but I think overall the card's pretty solid. Some decent names. I feel like we could see some pretty entertaining action, but I rated the card an A. I think it's just a solid A. Maybe you could go lower. I don't really know. I think it's just an A. I enjoy the fact that there are 3 title fights, but it's an okay card. I mean, I could say it could be better, but I do enjoy the card, and I'm really looking forward to, honestly, some of these fights that we'll see more so on the pay-per-view.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to try and make it sound worse than it is or anything. I mean, this, to me, is a fantastic card. It's funny because I wasn't totally sold on it about a month ago. I remember I was talking to somebody, about a month ago. I think it was June 25th, just to be completely precise. It was Adam Martin I was talking to, and he felt that as of that day, 214 was already better than 213. 213 still had Cerrone Lawler. I think 214 lacked one of the other 2 title fights, but now. Obviously, this is way better than the card that was headlined by Romero and Whitaker earlier this month. I mean, there was a time, I don't think I'm as excited for Cormier Jones 2 as I was if it happened a year ago at 200, but I'm still, as we've gotten closer now, it's been more, as I've, grown more confidence that it'll happen. I'm excited for it. Woodley Maia is probably not going to be actually that good of a fight. It's probably actually going to be a bad fight, but stylistically, it's still intriguing enough where it catches my interest mostly. Cyborg, it's a classic Chris Cyborg fight. You have the argument that Tony Evinger might give her the toughest test she's had, but how tough of a test will that really be? We'll find out. Lawler Cerrone is still a fight I love. The rest of the card, I mean, Lamas Knight on the undercard is really, really awesome. The undercard in general is awesome. So I'm looking forward to this. I would give this a straight A. So yeah, let's get right into it, because I know we're gonna be here a while because it is such a great card. So we'll start out on Fight Pass. I can't believe this is like a fight that's happening, but Joshua Burkman, Drew Dober in the lightweight division. Jed, we'll start with you. The People's Warrior or Drew Dober?
I'm pretty surprised Josh Burkman is getting another crack in the UFC. He's lost his last 3 in a row and has looked essentially progressively worse every time out. He's like won for his last 10 or something since he came back to the UFC after putting together like a good little stint in WSOF. Let me look that up. He is 1-5 in the UFC since coming back, with his only win being over KJ Noons, who I didn't even realize KJ Noons fought as recently as last year. Yeah, he's washed, and Drew Dober isn't. Like, that's going to be the extent of my analysis here. I don't think Drew Dober is a great fighter, but I do think he has actually been improving at a pretty steady clip as of late. And, his record is a little misleading. You've got that one super bad submission loss on there. It's just, I think Drew Dober doesn't suck as a fighter, and I think Josh Burkman is washed. So I'm picking Dober. I don't know how durable Burkman is anymore. He used to be very durable. So I guess I'll say Burkman can hold on. Drew Dober's not like a huge finisher. So I guess Dober by decision.
I was back and forth kind of with an outcome in this one. For Drew Dober, I am picking him, but I kind of was leaning a submission because we have seen Burkman submitted before a couple of times in his UFC return, but I'm in the end going to be picking a decision for him. Burkman, the only really combinations or shots that he throws are his left hand and a right kick to the outside. And besides that, he doesn't really have a lot of volume. As we've seen in some of his more recent fights, he's pretty conservative and just doesn't throw with a whole lot of emphasis behind his punches, especially in comparison to what he used to do and in the World Series of Fighting. Drew Dober, I wasn't really impressed too much with his last fight against Aubin Mercier. I thought that maybe he'd be able to outstrike him, but then again, he was coming in a lot shorter of a reach, wasn't able to get inside a lot of those shots. And Dober in this fight, I think, is going to be a little bit closer with his reach, just a 2-inch difference between the two. I think Dober is pretty crafty in the clinch if it gets in those positions with knees, and pretty good at short little elbows, but the fight's really tight, and I think Dober can maybe pull off just a technicality kind of form of a decision over Burkman. But I agree with you, Jed. I think that Burkman's kind of out of where he used to be. I don't think he's the same fighter. He's only won one UFC fight since coming back, and that was over KJ Noons. So I'm going to take Drew Dober, and I'll stick with what initial thought was, and that's by decision.
Yeah, my pick here is Drew Dober as well by decision. The guy is a sizable favorite for good reason. This isn't a matter of Drew Dober is such a great fighter and he's an up and comer and he's doing really great things, but it's just Josh Burkman. He's not a good fighter anymore. He's very, very shot. He's very washed up. I still don't believe lightweight is a good weight class for him. He's certainly a small welterweight, but he cuts seemingly he cuts a lot of weight to get down to 55, and so it's just that plays into this. Drew Dober, isn't a bad fighter either. A lot of people, when you think of Drew Dober, it's like, oh, the guy's really, really terrible. But he actually does some things quite well. In general, he's fairly well-rounded. His striking's not terrible. His grappling is all right. But this pick solely comes down to the fact that Burkman is done. The KJ Noons win was not impressive. It just came because Noons was, I guess, even more shot. That was a not great fight at all. But, here it comes down to one guy should be in the UFC, one guy shouldn't. And I'll go with the guy that should. Give me Drew Dober by unanimous decision. Fairly decisive. Next up, we got one of the better matchups on the card, actually, and it's obviously the second fight of the night only. Erik Sheldon taking on Jared Brooks. Jed, are you going to go with Showtime, the other Showtime, Erik Sheldon, or the Monkey God?
Give me Erik Sheldon here. This is a great fight. I think it's going to be a very close fight. We're talking two guys who are pretty good prospects for the division. Just no bullshit about it. Jared Brooks, I believe he's making his UFC debut, correct? Am I right there?
Yes.
Yeah, he's making his UFC debut, but he's been around. Been at Akhmat, been at when he had a WSOF, I think, right? He's been around the block. He's a good young prospect. Was he like 24 years old? And I expect big things out of him in general in the future. But Erik Sheldon, one, I do sort of like the idea that Erik Sheldon has competed in the UFC before. I know he lost to Pantoja, but Pantoja is already probably a top 15-ish 125er. We just saw Pantoja have a great performance against Neil Seery a week, 2 weeks ago, however long ago that was. And Pantoja's a really polished guy, whereas Erik Sheldon is he's still developing. Still a young guy. He's a huge dude for the division. Honestly, my biggest concern here with him would just be if he can consistently make this weight going forward, if he's not going to have scale trouble tomorrow when they weigh in, because he is like, this dude could be a big bantamweight in the future. Like, he's 5'6", he's got enormous arms. He is, he's just a big guy, and 125 doesn't feel like the right division for him to me. But, if he can do it, it's going to give him a little bit of an advantage in general. And I suppose that's going to be enough for me. That just coupled with like his size advantage is a huge reach edge here. Just that plus his experience in the UFC, not going to have those octagon jitters. I like him to just win a nip-tuck, really close decision, but I expect big things out of both these guys.
Yeah, I agree. I think both of these guys have a lot of potential to make some moves in the flyweight division. I've been back and forth on this one. I agree with you, Jed, too, on this. I think it's going to be a great fight, probably one of the better ones that maybe we'll see of the night. These two like to bring it. Both have pretty interesting personalities where they like to express themselves and get their name out there. In the end, have been leaning towards Jared Brooks. I like having watched a little bit of tape on him. I'm really impressed with his top control and with his ability to keep fighters on their back. Doesn't really let them get back up once he gets them down. But the problem that I've had with trying to decide and picking Jared Brooks is the fact that reach advantage. Erik Sheldon's going to have a 6-inch reach advantage in this fight. As you mentioned, he's the bigger fighter, and I don't know if how he's going to be able to deal with that. But then again, Brooks does have quite a bit of experience. I think he compiled like a 28-1 record amateurly in mixed martial arts, having been around for a long, long time. And he's still undefeated as a professional. We've seen Erik Sheldon lose a couple fights here and there, but in very, very razor close decisions. All three of them in his UFC career. You can go back and watch them, and they're all really close. Debatably, Sheldon won those fights. But I'm going to stick with Jared Brooks. I've been impressed with watching some tape on him. It's a risk, though, as I've mentioned, because he's going to be a lot smaller of a guy in this fight. But I think that we will see a decision. Not sure if either can get a finish, but I think it'll be an exciting fight.
Wait, Wes, who is that? Who'd you end up with at the end, Brooks?
I'm gonna side with Brooks.
I'm going Jared Brooks here as well. Not confident, very close fight. I think the odds indicate that. I want to say Brooks is a slight favorite, but definitely close, and as they should be. I like, as Jed mentioned, that Sheldon has that UFC experience. Brooks does not. Obviously, it's only one fight for Sheldon, but he's still been inside the octagon, had the chance to feel what that was like. Although Brooks did go through fight week because he was supposed to fight Ian McCall. I believe that was at 208. Correct me if I'm wrong. Earlier this year, and then McCall obviously pulled out again, very close to the fight. So he's gotten the UFC fight week feel out of the way, but it's still different having not yet stepped inside the octagon to actually fight. I like his top control. His wrestling is his bread and butter. His striking seems to be getting better. Sheldon, though, still has the advantage on the feet. So this really just comes down to where the fight plays out. If it's on the feet, Sheldon, with his reach advantage, as Wes pointed out, he's going to do work. He's going to be able to control Brooks on the feet and keep it where he wants it. But if Brooks is able to get inside, then this is a different fight. This is a gritty fight. This is a bit of a grinding-esque fight or style of fight. And that's one that, of course, favors the Monkey God. So I think it's going to be a fun matchup, not in the sense that Brooks is going to lie on top of him for 3 rounds, but I think Sheldon, he doesn't have terrible takedown defense. So I think if he does get taken down, I don't think we're going to see Brooks get into full mount and just pound him out or just grind him out for 3 rounds. I think Sheldon will have some success in defending the takedowns and then on the feet, and then he'll be able to get up from takedowns. I think ultimately Brooks is going to have his way mostly in this fight, but this is going to be a close one. It could result in a split decision. Brooks, if I have to give a scorecard, 29-28 all day. Brooks, though, is the pick. The wrestling will be the difference here. So Brooks by unanimous decision. All right, moving on with the featured fight pass or the prelim. Kaylin Curran welcomes back Alexandra Albu to the octagon. Albu has not fought in over 2 years, so it's been a little bit. Jed, you got the American or the Russian?
All right, we got to address something here. How is Albu in the UFC? Like, I know that she says she had like 4 or 5 fights in Thailand that didn't go on her record, but she made it into the UFC with 1 pro fight, and then, I mean, she won, so I guess I get that she gets to stick around, but it is shocking to me that she is in this organization at all. Like, I don't know. I just have no idea anything about her other than the 1 fight that you could reasonably have seen. On the other hand of that, Kaylin Curran shouldn't be in the UFC either. Like, Albu shouldn't be in the UFC because no one has any idea if she's good. Kaylin Curran shouldn't be in the UFC because she is not up to par and is like 1-5 in the organization. I think, does she even have a winning record? She might have an actual losing record, which is
she's got an even record.
Oh, okay, it's even. So that means because she beat Emily Kagan in the UFC. So that means she picked up 4 wins before the UFC. What's her record? 4, 5, and 5?
4-4. According to UFC.com, which isn't always right, but we'll go with 4-4.
So that means her 3 wins were in whatever trash ass regional organization she was fighting in. I don't even know off the top of my head.
Could be Invicta, but I don't know.
I don't think so. Maybe. I just don't think I don't remember her in Invicta, but let's not act like I'm super good with memory. Yeah, she has lost to just about everybody she's fought that's any good.
I'll run through her record real quick in the UFC.
Okay.
Debut, lost to Paige VanZant. That was November 2014. Then she got choked out by Alex Chambers. That was, of course, a big upset. That was May of 2015. Then she beat Emily Kagan. It was a round 2 submission. December 2015. Felice Herrig, she lost to the next first round sub, July 2016. Then her last fight, lost a decision December 3rd, 2016 to Jamie Moyle.
So, yeah, she hasn't beaten anybody good as far as I know. I have no idea if Alexandra Albu is any good. Like, we don't know any goddamn thing about her except for she's Russian. She can strike a little bit. At least there's some decent volume. And she was quick with that guillotine. I guess that's enough to take her here. Dude, this is just a fucking crapshoot. Like, it really is. We're dealing with an entity that we know is bad versus an entity that we won't really know shit about and who hasn't fought in 2 years. I would say if you're trying to look for betting advice from this card, here's the one I have. Don't put your money anywhere near this fucking fight. I'm taking Albu because I think very, very little of Kaylin Curran, and Albu showed a little bit of volume striking and quick instincts on the finish. And that's enough.
Yeah, I'm leaning Albu too. And then again, there's not that much tape on her, but it's hard to say in picking her that I'm confident just because, as you mentioned too, Jed, she hasn't fought since April of 2015. And sure, it says on her website, on the UFC's website, she's 6-0, but you can go on Tapology and ShareDog, and there's nothing that comes up. I can't find any other information about Albu. But I have seen some tape, and she does have pretty quick hands. The volume was one thing that was able to get her that victory in the fight that she had with Balderek, who I don't really know that much about, but I don't really know if she's going to be UFC caliber. Kaylin Curran, I wouldn't really call it a test because Curran really hasn't had the best UFC career either, knowing that she is now 4-4 in the UFC or in a mixed martial arts career, and her only win was over Emily Kagan. I ended up picking Albu in the end because I do like that volume. That was the biggest thing that I was able to see in the fight. She was very successful with landing a lot of counter shots, not really pushing the action too much, but Kaylin Curran, she's pretty active, decent on the feet, but then again, she looks a lot for takedowns, and sometimes she gets them, sometimes she doesn't. Albu may be able to capitalize with maybe another kind of guillotine choke there, or maybe if this fight goes down to the ground. I don't trust Kaylin Curran's submission defense because we've seen her succumb to a couple submission losses in her career in pretty quick the way that her opponents were able to set them up. So I'm going to take Albu by a second-round submission.
I'm going with the underdog. No idea why. Kaylin Curran is the pick. It's nothing to do with how the matchup is stylistically or stylistic or whatever the word is. I know Jed always gets on me for that. Albu hasn't fought in 2 years. She could be, ring rust out of her mind, or she could be so much better. She could be a completely different fighter, good or bad. So it's so hard to pick Alexander Albu and say because she's this, and this, she's better here, there. She could be completely different. I know we have to base it on her last fight, which of course was 2 years ago, but how reliable will that be? We'll find out. Curran just something about her makes me think she can be so much better, and I think that's probably true. I think if she gets the right training, and just maybe Invicta is what she needs. She should probably go down a league, fight, just get some experience, get back on the winning track, and I think she seems to. I don't know, something about her, just watching her fights, like she's not a great fighter. She's not a good fighter, but just something about her makes me feel like there's potential there, but we're just not seeing it. So I've picked Curran more than I haven't, and so maybe I'll be wrong yet again. I don't know. I just don't know enough about Albu. So many red flags there, and so I'll go with the 1-4 UFC fighter, Kaylin Curran. No idea how this will play out, but yeah, we will see. All right, moving on. Andre Fili, Calvin Kattar on the FXX prelim opener. Andre Fili was supposed to fight Doo Ho Choi. Choi pulled out last month with an injury. In comes Calvin Kattar. Kattar has had about 2 weeks to train for this fight. He found out about 2 weeks ago, which I found a bit weird just because Choi pulled out over a month ago. And the UFC took a solid 2 to 3 weeks to find an opponent. That's just kind of confusing. Maybe Kattar wasn't their next option or whatever. Who knows? But that is how long he's had to train. He's, of course, mostly been at CES. He's had 2 fights in the past couple of years. He's been really inactive. He went from 2013 and had no fights in 2014, 15, and finally got back inside the cage last year. So that is the story with Kattar. He is from Massachusetts. Jed, Andre Fili, and Calvin Kattar.
We don't really need to talk about this one. Andre Fili is a very good fighter. Calvin Kattar probably deserves a crack. He deserves a shot in the UFC. He might even be able to stick around. He's not a terrible fighter, but he is a fighter who's been doing a lot of good things in an incredibly small pond. He has been running the shit in Combat Zone, which is like a New Hampshire regional promotion. Like every state has one of theirs. He's just doing big things there, beating the shit out of people.
Doesn't he mostly fight at CES? That's what
he's fought in CES the last couple of times, but like a majority.
Combat Zone, he actually runs Combat Zone.
Yes, he's running the shit out of Combat Zone.
I thought, okay.
A majority of his career was spent in Combat Zone. I think his last 2, maybe 3, he fought in CES, but he of his 20 fights, I don't even know. He has 14
and 2.
15, yeah, of his 20 fights, I think 15 of them are in Combat Zone. So he's not a bad fighter by any stretch. He deserves a shot in the UFC. He deserves a call up in general. He didn't need to have to go on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series and earn his way in. He deserved a call up. It sucks that it comes on short notice against a guy who is a very good fighter. Hopefully he'll get another crack because he's, took this, like you said, the 2-week notice. He could add a month, which would be a little better. It wouldn't really make a difference. There are levels to this shit, and Andre Fili's just above him. Fili has lost to some very good guys. Yair Rodriguez, Godofredo Pepe, Max Holloway. All those dudes are legit dudes. Other than that, he has been perfect, I think, in his career. Certainly in the UFC. I know those are his UFC losses. I don't see how Kattar comes in and does anything other than be tough. My guess is Fili finds a way to get it done with a finish later, because I don't know how Qatar's gas tank's going to look. I think Fili's going to want to make a statement here, but I hope Kattar gets a real shot in the UFC and not something like this bullshit.
Yeah, they're pretty much throwing him into some deep competition, seeing that Felix coming off that win over Hakan Diaz in a fight where he struggled with takedown defense, but then Hakan, that's kind of his style. Andre's kind of always struggled with defense in the wrestling department, but it's quite improved from where it once was.
Kind of defense
Felix,
everywhere. We want to be honest.
I was thinking the same thing.
Feely, he's pretty active looking for takedowns too. Gets quite a bit pretty often, even though he's known more so for his striking abilities and not too much his wrestling. But the biggest reason that I'm picking Andre Feely in this fight is after watching a little bit of Calvin Qatar's not really that active wherever the fight really goes. When it's on the feet, he doesn't really throw that much. When he gets his opponents down, he doesn't throw a lot of ground and pound, but he does have great control. That's one thing that I did notice. And as we mentioned, Feely is not really the best off his back. We've seen him taken down a few times. So maybe he can get a shot in that aspect after watching just tape and seeing how he's able to control his opponents. But I do think that Feely is a better opponent physically. I think he's just too big of a test, especially for Qatar making his UFC debut. And I picked Feely by decision. Not sure if he's going to be able to finish Qatar, seeing that Qatar only has 2 losses on his record, and I think the only other loss was by submission, something that Feely doesn't have an extreme amount of finishes by. I was trying to find it, but either way, I do think Feely's the better fighter in this one. We're going to have to see how Qatar does, but I'm going to be taking Feely by a unanimous decision.
Yeah, the pick here is Andre Feely as well. The guy is a big favorite. It makes sense. Calvin Qatar, as I said, stepping up at short notice, that's not great. And this is a huge step up in competition for him. Fighting guys in CS is great. CS is a good local or promotion, but Andre Feely is arguably top 15 to top 20 caliber. I know when he beat Hakan Diaz last year, Diaz was in the top 10 to 15 at the time, but since he hasn't fought in a little while, he is no longer in the rankings. Feely is probably better ever. I think, as Wes sort of mentioned, Qatar's best chance is to grind him out. Feely has never had the best defense all around, but it's gotten better, and I just don't, I would be legitimately surprised if we see like a Qatar grind fest here, 30-27 over, upset over Andre Feely. That would really surprise me. For the most part, I think Touchy Feely can win wherever he wants. I think it's going to be mostly a striking battle. Qatar isn't the most active fighter in the cage, and actually talking about how often he fights. Feely, I'll go late TKO, probably in the 3rd round. I think he'll mostly dominate Qatar. Qatar will have his moments, I think, but this will mostly be one-sided in favor of Team Alpha Male's own Andre Feely. So 3rd round TKO is my official pick. Moving on, we got one of the more interesting matchups on the card, and I'll probably say that about every single fight from here on out. Renato Moicano taking on Brian T. City Ortega. Jed, who do you got?
I got Moicano. Or Brian Ortega's career, especially his UFC run, feels like a lot of smoke and mirrors almost. Not that he's a bad fighter, because he's very clearly not, but that he just kind of keeps pulling wins out of his ass. And I gotta think that eventually that has to stop happening. Like, if he wins, I won't be surprised, because he does that. That's a thing that he does, where he just loses all of the fight until he just starts trying in the very end. And then, dude, it's the thing though.
Guida and Brandel, exact same fights, other than one was a knockout. Yeah.
In 3 or 4 straight fights, he's not done shit and been losing. And then in the 3rd round, he's like, "Oh fuck, I guess I should try now." And then he just stops him. And it's a good thing that he has the ability to do that, to complete the flip switch and turn on the jets. But you do that, that type of shit is the stuff that catches up with you. And it's not like a Yoel Romero type of thing where he is picking his spots and finding it and then exploding, and he's just ending up with 3rd round stoppages, but he's being competitive throughout or dangerous throughout. He's mostly just losing, and then it genuinely feels like in the 3rd round he finally goes, "Oh fuck, I'm down 2 rounds. I have to try now." And so then he tries. I
And it's funny, his last two stoppages, Guida was probably up 2018. Brandao was absolutely up 2018.
I didn't look at the cards.
And then both of those stoppages were spectacular. Brandao especially.
Yeah.
It's not like this matters, but the scorecard for Clay Guida, Brian Ortega, I think Ortega was up in that last round, but it actually would have been a split decision in Ortega's favor if it did go to the judges.
Wow.
And he did get unanimous on that last round.
Well, that's just terrible judging because he clearly lost the first. He got fucking outboxed by the cardio boxing routine of Clay Guida. Like, it's the thing. And Moicano, on the other hand, is trying to make me hate him because for the longest time, I just assumed if you were an undefeated prospect at a jungle fight, you sucked and then you didn't know you sucked yet. But as soon as you got out of jungle fight, you'd find it's sort of like as if some dude came up through Explode fight series and was wrecking the shit and you just be like, yeah, but it's Explode. You probably are terrible. But Moicano did like all his work in jungle fight and then, Moicano's fucking like a pretty good fighter now.
He beat Jeremy Stephens.
What's he 3? I know. Is he 3-0 in the UFC now?
Yes.
He hasn't been active. That's the one thing. He has not been active.
No, yeah, he hasn't been super active, but like you said, Nick, he beat Jeremy Stephens. I know that was a split decision, but it was one of those split decisions that seemed like it shouldn't have been a split decision to me. Like, I thought it was pretty clear Moicano won 2 of the rounds.
I scored it for Stephens, but it was a close fight that could have gone either way.
I thought that it was a competitive fight, but I didn't think it. I thought it was obvious. I thought clearly Moicano won 2 rounds, but like nonetheless, going toe to toe or beating Jeremy Stephens is better than any of the wins Brian Ortega has, and like I'm just gonna pick now like Moicano because I don't think Brian Ortega can keep doing what he does. It won't surprise me if Brian Ortega like gets on his back. He's not going to pull guard or try and really effectuate a takedown. But if Moicano like shoots on him for some fucking reason, dude, Ortega could triangle his ass. He's got great guard. And Moicano does wrestle a little bit, but if Moicano just keeps us on the feet and boxes him up, he's going to win. Like, and that's just sort of how I see this. I'm willing to believe that Brian Ortega somehow pulls another one out of his ass because he seems to have that golden horseshoe stuffed up there, but that's got to end at some point. You can't fight like he does and have success consistently. So, yeah, Renato Carneiro by decision.
I think Moicano by decision is probably the most likely outcome, and that's just because of his fighting style. And I know a lot of people probably don't enjoy it, but he's very technical in the way that he moves around. Very calculated with the shots that he puts together, and that I kind of like that about him. I mean, it definitely wasn't the most exciting game plan, but it was definitely impressive to see what he implemented in his last fight against Jeremy Stephens, where he kind of struggled a little bit more with the takedowns in the fight with Zuparia Tukugov, and then he was still able to implement the same game plan, but Zubaria was a lot more pressure oriented than Jeremy Stephens was in that fight. Brian Ortega, the only thing that I really noticed with him is that in the losses that he's had, or not in the losses, excuse me, in the wins that he's had over fighters that were beating him up to that point, Clay Guida, Diego Brandao, and Thiago Tavares, all of them are pretty dedicated to moving forward and trying to expel a lot of high-paced action, especially early on, and that's one thing I think Ortega was able to capitalize on later in the fight. Renato Moicano is not really going to be the guy to do that, so maybe we'll see Ortega be the one to push this one a little bit more. And if he does, I think he's got a shot to win. I actually did pick Ortega, but I picked him by decision. I don't know if he has the ability to get a finish, but what I think could happen is if Moicano lands a takedown, because he does get some takedowns in some of his fights, likes to implement wrestling here and there. Brian Ortega, Jed, you mentioned it, he's really crafty off his back. He's jiu-jitsu black belt and was able to pull off a pretty incredible submission over Diego Brandao off his back. So he's got a great guard, and I feel like that's something that can maybe give him an advantage in this fight. But if the fight stays on the feet, like you mentioned, I think it's definitely Moicano. I'm going to go the other way, though. I'm going to go with Ortega by decision. I think that he's going to be able to land just a little bit more on the feet. His striking is okay. But I do think you're right in the fact that at some point something's going to catch up with Ortega. and this might be the guy to do it because of Moicano's style. But I will side and stick with my initial gut pick, and that was with Brian Ortega by decision.
When did Ortega fight Guida? That was it must be getting up close to a year, if not already a year.
What was that? UFC 199 on June 4th, 2016.
Yeah, so
Wes,
there
did
you
end
go.
with Ortega?
What's that?
Yes, I picked Ortega.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you finished with him or not. Got you.
I gotta imagine that the biggest thing Brian Ortega and his team and camp has been working on is his first 2 rounds where he looks not great at all. We've talked about it already. He was down 2018, or he should have been, to Guida. He was certainly down 2018 to Brandao. And then he pulled something out of his ass that is one of the better finishes all year. I mean, that Brandao was submission. I believe that was early 2016. That was one of the better submissions all year. And the knockout over Clay Guida, not many people knock out Guida. That was very impressive as well. So I'm kind of banking that is something they've looked at and realized, because it's very, very obvious that for whatever reason he doesn't get going till the 3rd round. At least he hasn't in his past few fights. Moicano is a very complete fighter. He's obviously very good on the ground, and his striking seems to be getting better. I mean, the Stevens fight was mostly on the feet, and he won. Again, I scored it for Stevens, but it was very, very close. Moicano did very well with one of the, a very good striker on the feet in Jeremy Stevens. So Moicano has more ways to win in that I think their grappling, Ortega's and Moicano's, are very close. Ortega's a bit more funky. I think he just kind of pulls things out from anywhere, where Moicano is just a bit more straightforward as far as his grappling goes. I'm going to go Ortega. I've been fairly high on him. I'm not confident because I think Moicano, again, is a bit more of a complete fighter. He has the advantage on the feet, and if it stays on the feet, he's going to win. Ortega's not a great striker. He's obviously a very good grappler, so is Moicano. I'm just sort of thinking Ortega pulls something out. Moicano could be up 2018, but then Brian Ortega turns it up in the 3rd round and is one of the better featherweights out there. This doesn't seem like that reasonable of a pick, but and this isn't necessarily because Brian Ortega is much better of a grappler, if at all, than Moicano, but I'm going to go 3rd round submission for Brian Ortega. I think he's going to be down a bit. Maybe it'll be tied up, and then he's going to realize, hey, I need to do something, and then he catches Moicano, who, of course, is a very good grappler in something fancy, and taps him out. So there you go. Brian Ortega, 3rd round submission. That is my pick. Next up, we got Aljamain Sterling, the Funk Master himself, taking on former UFC bantamweight champion Renan Burrell in a 140-pound catchweight matchup. This was, of course, supposed to be Burrell's return fight to bantamweight. The California Athletic Commission did not allow that due to Renan Burrell's past failed weight attempts at 135. They're not letting him fight. They're not letting him fight in that division, and thus they are doing it 5 pounds heavier in a 140-pound catchweight. Jed Aljamain Sterling, the slight favorite, somewhat surprisingly here, or the former champ, the Baron, Renan Burrell.
Dude, Aljamain Sterling is an idiot. I know that he wanted this fight, but it's like one of the worst fights he could pick of the goddamn division. I don't even understand, man. It's so damn dumb. It's especially bad because I don't even think Burrell's ranked because of his flirtations up a weight class and shit. This is just a clusterfuck. And add on top of that the fact that the CSAC won't let Burrell compete at 135 and made it a catchweight. That just plays even more into Burrell's hands. That helps Burrell. If he had to cut the extra 5 pounds of a cut that shouldn't be as hard for him as it is, but it is hard because his camp, as we've talked about several times before, notoriously shitty at doing their job of cutting weight. He would be sucked out a little more, be drained a little more. Maybe Sterling could kind of weather the first round and try and pick up points and win over the back half of the fight. I don't know. I just don't know what the fuck he's gonna do. Aljamain Sterling's not a very good striker. Like, he's getting better, but he does weird, awkward, disjointed shit that has no kind of connective tissue, no designs beyond throwing. There's no plan in his strikes. It's not like, ooh, I'm gonna develop behind a jab and work combinations and mix levels or anything like that. It's just like, I'm gonna stand here and maybe throw some kicks. Sweet, you do that. Burrell's gonna kick you back 1,000,000,000 times harder and fuck your whole goddamn shit up. Aljamain Sterling, where he excels, is as a grappler, and Burrell is one of the actual legitimate best defensive wrestlers in the history of the sport. Statistically, he might even be the best. I mean, we all know realistically that Jose Aldo is the best counter wrestler that has ever lived, and as far as MMA goes. And, you know, John Jones is probably up there too. But Burrell is right there in that same tier of, you can't take this motherfucker down. And so if your plan is to come in and take him down, you have lost the fight. Aljamain Sterling, that has to be his plan, because if his plan is to come in and stand with Burrell, he doesn't have anything to offer him. He is just going to get hit a bunch and then either fall over because he's been hit too much or lose a decision. If Sterling wins this, it means to me that Burrell has fallen off to a degree that he's just done. Like, this is the best stylistic matchup he could basically ask for. And I'm picking him to win. I think Sterling will get beat up over the course of 15 minutes. I don't know if he gets stopped. My guess is that he doesn't, that he quickly sort of realizes what he's in with and maybe does that like Demian Maia thing where when he's been really stifled, the old Demian Maia thing, not his current incarnation, but where if he couldn't take you down, he might just commit to being a bad kickboxer and staying far away out of fear. And I sort of think that that's what's going to happen. Sterling's going to try some shots. He's going to fail. Burrell's going to kick him a bunch, and then Sterling's going to spend most of the rest of the fight throwing weird-ass strikes from far away that don't do anything and losing a decision.
I 100% agree. I mean, if you think about the comparisons trying to make between these two fighters, I feel like everything that Aljamain Sterling does or tries to implement in fights, Burrell does it to an extreme level. There's a reason Burrell and Jose Aldo are known for their takedown defense. Both at like ridiculous rates, and that's the fact that they've trained together. And Burrell is still one of the best defensive wrestlers in the game. I don't even remember a guy that's ever taken Burrell down. And Aljamain Sterling, that's pretty much one of the only things that he likes to implement in fights. If it stays on the feet, Burrell is very underrated still with the striking, despite maybe his chin going downhill a little bit. You mentioned too, Jed, the fact that this weight, now he doesn't have to go all the way down in the weight to bantamweight. I think that's going to help Burrell now that they're fighting at a catch weight. I think that Sterling, with the feet, the only weapons that he really throws are kicks, and Burrell is outstanding at kicks, throws quite a high volume of them, but very dynamic abilities. The only difference between these two is that Aljamain Sterling is more active and controlling. I think when he's able to get on top, he's just has a lot of pressure that he's able to implement. Burrell, we've seen some fighters be able to stand up from some of the stuff that he threats, but Burrell is a very well-rounded athlete. I still think one of the best probably in the division. I mean, he definitely has fallen off quite a bit, as we saw in the Jeremy Stevens fight, and maybe this is a decline for him, but I think this is an awful matchmaking or just an awful fight for Sterling, just because everything Sterling does, as I mentioned, Burrell does a little bit better. I'm taking Burrell by a decision. I think that maybe Hennon could pull off maybe some kind of submission if he's able to get the fight down. But to be honest, I think the more likely outcome, seeing Burrell hasn't had a finish since Mitch Gagnon in December 2014, and before that, Rai Faber also in 2014. I think the decision is going to be likely. So I'm taking Burrell.
Yeah, I hate to keep this as boring as it's been.
It hasn't been boring. There have been a lot of different picks, actually.
I think me and Wes have agreed on close to everything.
You picked Curran, Wes picked Albu. Y'all have agreed on everything else, but I picked Shelton, and I picked Moicano. There's been a fair amount of decision of not groupthink here.
Right. Differentiating on Curran Albu barely counts just because of how bled that fight is. But I am going Burrell here as well. I just think stylistically it's, as you guys said, a really, really bad matchup for Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain Sterling is a poor striker and a guy who, I like what Jed said about the old Demian Maia a this Demon Maya thing. Stand back, try and kickbox and lose because that's not your bread and butter and you're not that good at it. Sterling hasn't seemed to be getting that much better, which is a bit surprising. He's at one of the better camps. He's young, and I expected a bit more. I just to develop a bit more than he has. It's been a lot of the same stuff. Not that great of a striker yet, a very good grappler, but that won't really matter here in this fight because Hennenbrau, as you guys both said, some of the great best takedown defense in all the sport. Aljamain Sterling needs to take Hennenbrau down to win this fight, and he's not going to. Hennenbrau is going to light Aljamain Sterling up on the feet for 3 rounds. He's not going to knock him out. If this was the Hennenbrau pre-TJ Dillashaw first fight, I'm going Brown by TKO all day. But Hennenbrau, my one concern picking any Hennenbrau fight is just how shot is he really. The weight cut also has to be an issue. He couldn't make 135, basically 140. It's in the middle of where he's comfortable and where he's not, so we'll see. Hopefully it'll be okay. If I had to guess, I think it will be. But I look at Hennenbrau's career as Anthony Pettis, one-time champ, one of the, at one point he was, very close to the top of the pound-for-pound list. I think he reached number 3 at his peak. Dropped off super fast. Just not the same fighter he was. Took so much damage, and now he's less active in the cage. He just doesn't do as much. He's just not as good all around. So that's, of course, the one main concern. I don't think he's looked good as of late either. The Felipe Nova win was all right, but we're also talking about, Felipe Nova. He should have dominated Nova, and he looked good, but, it wasn't just marking like maybe some expected. The pick here is Hennenbrau, simply because it's a bad matchup stylistically. If this was, even Thomas Almeida, like Hennenbrau should be Thomas Almeida, but no guarantees he would at this point. But the pick is Hennenbrau. I'll go him by unanimous decision. I think it'll be fairly clear. I don't expect this to be super fun. Although matchup-wise, on paper it's kind of interesting. I don't think it'll be that fun because Sterling will just struggle on the feet for 3 rounds, and that's kind of going to be the fight. Next up, we got one of the best fights on the card. Ricardo Lamas taking on Jason the Kid Knight in a pivotal featherweight matchup. The bully, Ricardo Lamas, is ranked number 3. Jason Knight comes in at number 15. Last time I checked, the odds were even. Right now, Lamas is plus 102 and Knight is minus 122. So money has come in on Jason Knight a little bit. I'm surprised to see Lamas at plus money. Jed, Ricardo Lamas, the veteran here, or Jason the Kid Knight?
Oh man, this is something else here. One of the toughest fights to pick on the card. I'm a big Hick Diaz fan as far as his in-cage ability goes. Who isn't? Who can watch this guy fight and not be entranced by what he does inside the octagon? I picked him to beat Chaz Scully. I picked him to beat Alex Caceres. I've been riding his train for a minute. I am sorely tempted to pick him to beat Ricardo Lamas here. I think he has an excellent chance to do so. In fact, logically, I think he probably is the correct pick. He throws much more. He's much more active on the feet. Just a ton of volume, a ton of pace, a ton of pressure. He is equally as active on the ground, both in transition and just off of his back. He works at very high guard, tries to get mission control and start attacking instantly, looking for sweeps, looking for subs. And he gave Chaz Scully fits, and Chaz Scully is a grappler. My hesitation here is somewhat of a bad style matchup, it feels like, and Ricardo Lamas is a guy who seems to have outkicked his coverage for a majority of his UFC career. Not that he's a bad fighter, but like if you look at the guys he has lost to, he's only lost to the very, very best. Outside of losing to Danny Castillo way back in the day before he was really a fully formed kind of fighter, his losses have been, to the best of my recollection, Holloway, Mendez, and Aldo. Like, those are 3 of the best 5 featherweights of all time. You're talking the 2 best guys in the division right now. He's just a sensational fighter. And he's a great opportunist. Like, that's really where he makes his hay. He can win just off sort of a meat and potatoes wrestle boxing game, but where he really has sort of stood out is the ability to jump onto opportunities that present themselves instantly. If somebody gets hurt, if somebody opens up their neck, if somebody fucks up for just an instant, he is a goddamn killer. He goes for the throat on that weakness immediately. And I'm going to pick him here both because I can't get that Kawajiri fight out of my mind. I think for stretches, certainly Bermudez, if he feels compelled to, can take Jason Knight down. Jason Knight's not a great defensive wrestler. I'm sure he's improving, but he's not really there one yet. In part because he's very content to go down and play off his back. Playing guard is a tough game in general in this sport. It is very tough if you are going to commit to playing an actual guard game. Jason Knight doesn't do the 60-second guard and then try and get up or move. He will play the round on, and if he can't get any traction, then he's just going to end up losing the round. I think Ricardo Lamas is a good enough grappler to stop most of what Jason Knight's doing off his back and break the tempo that way. And I'm also just the way Jason Knight fights, the way he is constantly sort of putting himself in positions for transition. I feel like in one of those, Ricardo Lamas is going to do that thing he does where he just jumps on an opportunity, jumps in a window, and locks something up. I will be no way surprised if Jason Knight gets the damn thing done. But I am going to pick the more polished, I won't say prospect because he's not a prospect. I'll pick the more polished fighter, the guy we know more about, the guy who has been in there, done that, versus the guy trying to make a pretty massive leap up in competition right here.
I really like this fight. I think that this is definitely going to be a contender for fight of the night that we'll see throughout the night, just because these two have very similar styles and also are very back and forth in the way they transition in different positions. Neither really gets held down too much. I'll say this about Jason Knight first. I think the guy is still extremely underrated. I'm really high on this guy as well. He came in on 2 weeks' notice, I think, and fought Tatsuya Kawajiri and lost, but displayed a pretty decent just performance in the fight despite the loss. And before that, he only had one professional loss. He has a win over Thiago Moises, who's a fantastic athlete. He's now won 4 fights in a row in the UFC since losing to Tatsuya Kawajiri. Jason Knight, he's very crafty in what he puts together. The output you mentioned is something that he excels at, but he's also growing quite a bit in his striking game. Jason Knight came into the UFC being known more so for his submissions, that rubber guard, and just being very, very crafty in different positions. But his striking is very, very underrated, very powerful. We saw him take advantage of that in the Chad Skelly fight, and also a couple moments there in the Alex Caceres fight. I'm going to be picking Jason Knight in the end. I really like him. I think he's got a lot of I wouldn't say potential because he's already shown it, but I do think that this is going to be a fun fight. I think Ricardo can show some competitiveness in the fight, but he's been pretty inconsistent in what he's put together, despite having lost to the best of the best, as in Chad Mendes, Max Holloway, and Jose Aldo in recent memory. And then I think Yuri Alcantara knocked him out once a long time ago. But Lamas hasn't really fought an extremely amount these past couple of years. It's been 2 fights every now and then, a loss and a win. Two fights in 2015, a loss and a win. Was quite active pretty early on in his career. I think that Lamas does have ways to win this fight, but I think that Knight's pressure is going to be something that hurts him because Ricardo Lamas doesn't really do the best under pressure, as we saw in the Max Holloway fight. I also think that Jason Knight can take advantage in different transitions when the fight gets to the mat, just because Knight is very, very good off his back, very good at controlling with that rubber guard, but also when he's able to get positioning on top, he's very good at controlling in those different positions as well. So I think that Jason Knight might have a little bit of an advantage in this one. I really like him. I think he's got a lot of potential, and I'm looking forward to this fight, possibly a fight of the night. So I'm going to take Jason Knight by unanimous decision. But I do think that this is going to be exciting no matter what. So hold on to your seats.
Yeah, if we weren't talking about a card that also had John Jones, Daniel Cormier, and Robbie Lawler, Donald Cerrone on it, this would be my pick for fight night easily. This should be a very fun fight. Jason Knight has a lot of potential. This is a huge step up in competition, and it's tough to say whether he's ready for it. Ricardo Lamas is a guy I've always seemed to underestimate in general, but he's one of the best featherweights on the planet. As Jed mentioned, he's lost to the best of the best, and that's it. Jose Aldo, Chad Mendes, Max Holloway, and I guess there's two others. I guess that's Danny Castillo and one other. But most recently, he only loses to the best of the best. Right now, he's number 3 in the world, and that makes sense. Jason Knight, though, he's like a different animal. He's crafty. He's good. He's getting better. His progression has been really interesting and unbelievable to watch because, he went from getting grinded out by Tatsuya Kawajiri in his debut to now fighting a top contender, being in the rankings, being a guy that everybody has their eye on as a potential top contender in the future. Guy's young. The guy has a lot of flair. The guy, people like him. Stylistically, this is a tough matchup to call because he's never been the greatest. He's never had the best defensive wrestling, and Ricardo Lamas obviously is a very, very good wrestler and has lots of good, very good at controlling his opponents. But Jason Knight, I think he's crafty enough and crazy enough to be able to not let Ricardo Lamas touch the Kawajiri, and I think that was Kawajiri. Sure, Knight wasn't the same fighter he was today. I don't think in general, as far as his defense goes or just all around, that was his debut. I don't think that happens again. I could be wrong. I just don't. I don't have the feeling we're going to see that style of fight. Knight is going to do well on the mat because he's a lot funkier. He's good in transitions. He's good off his back. He's good on top. He's really good everywhere on the mat. He's really, really fun to watch on the mat, and his striking is getting better. I want to say he has a bit of a reach advantage. No, reach is dead on, even at 71 inches. Lamas is probably the more technical striker, but he's never been known for his striking, and I think Knight plays quite well or fights quite well at a distance. I think he might be able to do decent on the feet against the vet in Ricardo Lamas. In general, the pick here, I think I favor Jason Knight. It's a very close fight. It'll be very back and forth, very fun. I just think, I have to think about his grappling, and I think that's going to be the difference here. Lamas is a very good wrestler, very good control, but he is not the crazy type of grappler that Jason Knight is. His scrambles, he gives up a lot of positions, like Jed mentioned. And I can understand the idea that he's going to leave himself open, and Lamas is going to hop on that because he's a smart fighter, because he knows what he's doing, and he's been in there with the best of the best. But Jason Knight makes it work. Some fighters, when they do that, that's a very bad thing. But others, they give up positions for the better, and that's a guy like Jason Knight. The pick here is Jason Knight by decision. Ricardo Lamas, too tough of a test and a step up for me to believe that Knight can get him out of there. But nonetheless, Jason Knight has a big, the opportunity is huge, but also I think his ceiling's very high. This is a guy, he's only early 20s, I believe. We could be seeing him fight for the title one day. Jason Knight by decision, maybe a split. All right, UFC 214 main card live on pay-per-view. In a couple of days, Jimmy Manuwa and Volkan Ozdemir kicks things off. Jed, are you going to go with the poster boy or no time?
Ew, great question, sir. Great question. I'm interested in this one, man. I'm doing my best. I just don't care. I don't think anybody really does care. Jimmy Manuwa is going to win because Jimmy Manuwa hits really hard, and Volkan Ozdemir, it has to put himself into the range to get hit. That's it. Like, unless Volkan Ozdemir happens to have an area chin, maybe he does. Like, he could totally have one. He's going to just, for him to operate his kind of kickboxing attack, he has to be in close. Jimmy Manuwa hits really, really hard and is getting better about developing tools to open up shots. He's at his jab is vastly improving. And I think that this is pretty like it seems pretty obvious to me. Jimmy Manuwa has lost to 2 of the 3 best light heavyweights in the world, or I guess 4 best light heavyweights in the world. And I don't think Volkan Ozdemir is there. I'm excited for the time when Volkan Ozdemir, basically by virtue of being the one dude younger than 30 in the division, becomes your UFC light heavyweight champion purely just because everybody ages out. And then because he will have nobody to fight because light heavyweight is an abyss of talent, everyone will be talking about Volkan Ozdemir moving up to heavyweight to take on heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou, who is the only guy young enough to be heavyweight champion in the next 6 years. So it should be really exciting when that's the MMA future we live in. But yeah, give me Jimmy Manuwa because Volkan Ozdemir, we still don't really know much about him, and he's going to get hit. If he has a great chin, he can beat him because Jimmy Manuwa is not like a wonderful fighter, but I just don't think it's going to matter. Jimmy Manuwa is going to hit him. Volkan Ozdemir is going to fall down within 15 minutes. Second round, sure.
Wes, you're muted.
Wesley.
I forgot. I've been back and forth on this one, to be honest, because Volkan Ozdemir is pretty, I feel like, underrated. And I say that in a way that I feel like a lot of people counted him out when he fought Misha Cirkunov, especially me. But then again, he ran forward. Misha did and got clipped in that fight. OSP, I thought OSP won that fight against Ozdemir, but I went back and watched a little bit of tape on Ozdemir. Actually, every knockout that he's got in his mixed martial arts career has come in the first round. Volkan Ozdemir throws, when he throws in combinations, he pushes forward, and he pushes forward fast, and he tries to land those big shots. And he was able to capitalize on a decent amount of shots there in the fight with OSP. And Jimmy Manuwa's striking defense is only at 51%. We've seen Jimmy Manuwa get knocked out by, I guess, both Rumble, but then the first fight was Alexander Gustafsson, where he got knocked out in the second round. And we don't really know Gustafsson too much with his striking power. Now they are training partners, and I think Gustafsson's probably helped him quite a bit. Manuwa fights very, very long. He utilizes his reach very well in his fights, despite kind of fighting a little bit taller and a little bit more on flat-footed. But he capitalizes, like I said, really well on that. I think Ozdemir has a shot. And I'll say now, I won't be surprised if Ozdemir can go out there and maybe knock him out in the first round. But I think that Manuwa might fight a little bit more calculated. Ozdemir throws quite a bit of leg kicks too, especially when he starts slowing down as the fights go on. Jimmy Manuwa has shown in his fights that he almost gets better kind of as the fight goes on, that he still shows quite a decent amount of cardio, pretty good conditioning, and still is able to push forward in that third round when he gets there. We've only seen that once, but I do trust Manuwa more in the third round than I do Ozdemir. I do think Ozdemir might take that first round, and like I said, he might be able to knock him out. But I do think Manuwa is going to be, like I said, the more calculated fighter. I actually picked a decision in his favor, which might be a bad call, knowing the fact that these two have quite a bit of knockouts. But Ozdemir's never been finished. I think Manuwa was slightly the better fighter. And for that reason, I think Manuwa, if we like Jed, you mentioned, Ozdemir might have a great chin for all we know. Manuwa may not be able to put him away, and that's kind of what I was thinking. So I'm going to stick with it, Jimmy Manuwa by a unanimous decision.
My pick here is Jimmy Manuwa as well, but I'm not going to be, super shocked if Volkan Ozdemir gets it done because I'm, like a lot of people, 0-2 picking Volkan Ozdemir in the UFC. The guy went from being booked to fight for the Titan UFC, I believe, heavyweight title. That was either late last year, the very end of last year, or earlier, very early this year. And now he's in what could be considered a number one contender fight in the UFC. It's really crazy how far he's coming. Really, it's 2 fights. That goes to show you how shallow his vision is. Stylistically, this is a good matchup for Jimmy Manuwa because he's the better striker, and Ozdemir is not going to take him down or anything. He's going to try and knock him out, and maybe he does the same thing that he did to Misha Cirkunov, where he just like some weird punch out of nowhere and bang, he's all over in 40 seconds. But you can't really count on that, I don't think, when you're picking a fight like this. Jimmy Manuwa, He hits harder. He's more accomplished. He's been in the UFC longer. He's fought the better fighters. He's the better. He's a bit more technical on the feet, I think. But Ozdemir, one thing going for him, he moves a bit more than Manuwa does. He has leg kicks. So he, if he like stays back and pot shots and just a few shots around, makes it boring, but makes it, effective enough, he could get the win. If Manuwa chooses to not like hunt him down or whatever and knock him out like he should be able to do, Ozdemir could get W. Or, of course, a flash knockout like he usually gets. I guess that's an option. But the reasonable pick here, I think, is Jimmy Manuwa. He should get the job done in devastating fashion. Jimmy Manuwa by knockout in the first round. I think that's, a pretty solid pick. That is my pick. Moving on. One of the best fights on the card, maybe the best fight on the card. Ruthless Robbie Lawler taking on Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Supposed to happen in UFC 205 last year at MSG in November. Supposed to happen at UFC 213 earlier this month, International Fight Week. And here we are, July 29th. It is finally going down. Robbie Lawler, the former UFC welterweight champion, he has not fought in a year. It'll be a year on Sunday. When he was knocked out by current champ Tyron Woodley and lost his title. And Donald Cerrone has not been inside the cage since January, which, of course, is a huge layoff for Cowboy Cerrone standards. He is coming off a TKO loss in round number 2 to Jorge Masvidal. A bit of an upset there, I believe. All right, Jed. Robbie Lawler, Donald Cerrone, who walks away victorious?
Give me Brutal Bobby Law. Oh, man. Where to even start with this one? Great fight. A sensational fight. Feels like maybe if this had happened a year ago, like right after the 201 loss, before Cerrone got kind of brutally busted up, I think we might be a little more excited about it, even though had it happened then, maybe would have felt a little more concerned that Robbie Lawler was coming out of arguably the worst loss of his career, returning so quick. I think that this helped him. I think it helped Robbie Lawler to take a year off, basically clear the cobwebs out, not put nearly as much damage, mileage on his body so quickly. At the same time, Donald Cerrone in his last fight looked like maybe he's starting to show that he is starting to feel the effects of him fighting 5 times a year and without a lot of defense in general. I'm picking Robert Lawler. Anything could happen here. Like, I think Donald Cerrone has enough of a offensive, violent, game that if Robbie Lawler really is over the hill, if he's washed, Cerrone can put him out. Conversely, I think even if Donald Cerrone is in peak condition, Robbie Lawler can still put him out even if he's a little washed. I'm not sure what we're going to see. I'm not sure what incarnations of both guys are going to be there. Thing that tips it over the edge for me is as many improvements as Cerrone has made, he's still pretty hittable. And the way he effectuates his best offense seems like it's not going to play that well against Robbie Lawler. He likes to, I know he's getting better as a boxer and he's got okay hands, but really he likes to use his hands to set up kicks. And he does that by kind of flashing the hands, working inside with them, making opponents respect them, move back, and then he pops up a kick. And Robbie Lawler is more than happy to stay in the pocket and kind of roll and shuck and just exchange in there. So if Donald Cerrone comes forward trying to flash the hands and then go upstairs with a head kick, Robbie Lawler is just going to counter that with a big fucking left hand, and just be like, and sit him on his ass. The other thing that really sways it for me, Robbie Lawler never got the credit he deserved as an excellent body puncher. Donald Cerrone has weak guts, man. Like, balls for days, but he can't get punched in the tummy. And I expect Robbie Lawler to be able to both. He's got a surprisingly good left body kick as well that could shuttle up Cerrone with the quickness. I just think that unless Lawler really is shot, and we have no indication really that he is, aside from the fact that he's been in some of the most hellacious wars in recent memory, anybody can get one-shotted by Tyron Woodley. That's not an indictment of his chin to have that happen to him. So I am I just think that if both men are even near their best forms, I think Robbie Lawler takes this all day. So I'm sticking with Bobby Law, man. Robbie Lawler's going to come in, work the body, and I think he's going to get a stoppage.
Yeah, I'm leaning the same way with you. I've got Robbie Lawler picked in this one. I think it has the stylistics, of course, to be a fight of the night. Knowing who Robbie Lawler is, knowing who Donald Cerrone is, and looking at what they've done. But I feel like at this point in their careers, that first off, both have the abilities to get an early finish, which automatically kind of rules out a possible fight of the night. And we've seen both of these two get quite a bit of stoppages, but also get stopped in their own regards. I like what you said, Jed. The biggest thing that I noticed was Robbie Lawler with his time off, the fact that he's taken pretty much a full year. It'll be actually 364 days. I don't. There might have been a leap year this year, but either way, he fought Tyron Woodley on July 30th in 2016. He'll be fighting on the 29th of this year. So it's pretty much been almost exactly a year. Donald Cerrone, I think that it's caught up with him a little bit. I'm a huge fan of both of these two, but Cerrone has been quite in a bit of wars as well, has taken quite a bit of punishment also from not only just the head, but also in the body. And I was actually going to hit on it too. Robbie Lawler has great body shots. And Jed, pointed that out. Robbie Lawler is very underrated at what he's able to pull with that. And that's Cerrone's biggest weakness. He tends to fold over once you're able to punch him there just a couple times, and we know why. But I think that Robbie Lawler, at this point in their career, is still maybe just a little bit more fresh of a fighter. I say that, though, just not with a lot of confidence, knowing that Lawler has been in some of those wars. But Cerrone, you mentioned it. He puts together combinations with strikes and then leads in with kicks. We've seen Robbie Lawler hurt by a few head kicks in his career, especially in the third round of Rory, with about, I think, a minute left. Rory was able to capitalize there. But Robbie Lawler, he's pretty offensive. He's got a high output, good body shots. He's also a pretty underrated takedown artist, along with Cerrone. So maybe we could see a couple takedowns in the fight, depending on who implements a pretty strategic game plan. But I think Robbie Lawler is going to be able to take this one. I haven't picked by a third round TKO. I do think that this could be a pretty exciting fight if it gets past that first round. But to be honest, there is a likelihood that we see one of these two get stopped pretty early, seeing how they've been finished before in recent memory. But I'm going to take Robbie Lawler by a third round finish over Donald Cerrone.
I'll complete the hat trick and go with the former UFC welterweight champion, ruthless Robbie Lawler, to defeat Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Two fantastic fighters that may be close. Well, they are closer to the end of their careers than the start, but could be on the decline. I think, Cerrone still question marks. I mean, getting knocked out by Jorge Masvidal isn't that big of a deal because Masvidal is a very, very good talent and he hits hard himself. But I think we'll have an idea after this fight. If he gets knocked out by Lawler, then we're going to start thinking, all right, both guys are knockout artists, but 2 in a row knockouts, not the best. Maybe he comes back better than ever because, look at the RDA loss. The next, just a couple months after, he tapped out Alex Oliveira and went on a tear in the welterweight division before finally beating Masvidal earlier this year. So we don't have any evidence that either guy is declining per se because they've lost to guys that hit really hard, and specifically Woodley against Lawler. But it's the general sense, and it's interesting. This whole matchup is interesting because had this happened in November when it was supposed to happen, I was on board the Cowboy Cerrone train. And, since then, we've seen a Cerrone loss. And now that Lawler has taken the time off, now I'm going with Robbie Lawler. It's completely the year off has sort of we all had the idea that Lawler was done right after the Woodley loss, but now that idea has kind of faded a little bit. It's gone away since he's had the time off, and we've sort of forgotten about that. Whereas Cerrone, his loss is a bit more fresh. He's, if this ended up happening a year after now, we probably think both guys are at the peak of their careers. It's interesting how our opinions sort of change like that. The pick here is Lawler. This is going to be a stand-up war. I think this is going to be a really fun fight. The potential of a quick finish from either guy is there because I'm not too sold on either guy's chins nowadays. I think both guys can get knocked out. Lawler hits harder. He's the bigger guy. He is the guy who has been a career, middleweight, but most, welterweight, most recently, where Cerrone, you can still tell Cerrone, sure, he's a big lightweight, but you can tell that, he's the guy that would benefit from a 165-pound division. So I like Lawler's power. The body shots could be make it, be a key part of this fight. Cerrone has good head kicks, and I think that was smart of Wes to point out the Roy McDonald sequence where McDonald came close to knocking him out at the end of one of the rounds in their fight of the year back in 2015. If Cerrone lands, a head kick right to Lawler's melon, could be all over. I mean, same goes to Lawler. Lawler has decent kicks, and Cerrone doesn't have great defense. This is really gonna come down, to a matter of who lands the hardest first, I think, because I'm not sold on either guy's chins. As I said, the pick here is Robbie Lawler by TKO in round 3. I think both guys survive and put on a very, very entertaining back and forth fight in the first 2, and I think it's not that Lawler's going to necessarily take over in round 3. It's just that the damage is going to catch up to Cerrone first, and he won't be able to take anymore. And Robbie Lawler will put him away very late. I wouldn't be shocked if this goes to the judges. And then, on the flip side, I won't be shocked if either guy puts his opponent away, within a matter of moments. So the pick here is Lawler by round 3 TKO, but this is a fight where a lot can happen. Moving on, we got our first of 3 title fights. It is for the interim UFC Women's Featherweight title because Jermaine Duranami is still getting hand surgery or something. I don't, there's no way she's scared of anybody possibly named Cyborg. But
not for the interim title.
No, I know.
Okay, I thought you. Okay. Carry on.
I'm doing the little thing where I try to make a joke, but it doesn't, go through at all.
Yeah, you're not good at that.
I know.
You're not good at that.
All right, for the for the women's featherweight title, let's leave it at that. Chris Cyborg, Tonya Evinger. It's supposed to be Megan Anderson. Megan Anderson pulled out, I want to say, a month or so back due to personal issues. And Tonya Evinger, the Invicta FC Bantamweight champion, is no longer the champion. I guess they're doing a Bantamweight title fight over there for the new title. She is in the UFC for the first time. She's stepping up in weight. She's taking the challenge of the very scary Chris Cyborg. Will Cyborg finally get the UFC featherweight title that she should have had a year ago or more? Or will Tonya Evinger play huge spoiler and pull off one of the biggest upsets ever? Jed.
Well, for one, it's not the real title. We all know Jermaine Duranami is the real women's featherweight champion. And
and this is why I called it the interim title, but you're just better at doing this than I am.
It's not an interim title; it's the real one because the UFC is full of shit. We all know who the real champ is. The lineal UFC featherweight champion is and will always be Jermaine Duranami, and that's just the facts, Jack. You can't dispute that shit. Fuck them. More importantly, you and I talked about this on the circus. This is the best fighter Cyborg's ever fought, straight up. Of all the women Chris Cyborg's fought, Tonya Evinger is easily, I think we could say pretty comfortably, easily the best incarnation of a fighter she has fought at the time she's faced him. You can debate her fights with Marlos Curran because of kind of where Curran is historically as a women's fighter, but she was a pioneer, and even Tonya Evinger of today would whip the shit out of Marlos Curran of 10 years ago or whatever. It is just like this is the best. I'm excited for this fight purely because we get to see Chris Cyborg against a credible opponent. Like, no disrespect, really, but they shouldn't have been fighting Chris Cyborg. They're 125ers at best, and Chris Cyborg is a legitimate 145er. I think I really, really want to talk myself into Tonya is the thing. Like I'm trying so goddamn hard. she can win a round. Like, I honestly think she can win a round. If this was a 3-round fight, I would have talked myself into picking Tanya Evinger straight up.
By Wes's expressions, I have a feeling he's going to pull something out of his ass and pick Tanya Evinger, but we'll see.
I hope he does, because he's a bold motherfucker if he does. I can't quite get there because it's a 5-rounder, and that's it. But here's the thing. I'm going to lay out the case for why I tried so hard to pick her. Tanya Evinger is fucking tough. She is just ridiculously, stupidly tough. And you got to be like, the person who's going to beat Chris Cyborg got to be durable. They got to be fucking leather tough, because they're gonna have to take shots. They are not going to get in there unscathed. So they're going to have to wade through the violence and rough Cyborg up on the interior, work takedowns, and rough her up on the ground. Now, Chris Cyborg is not a bad grappler. She was at one point, improved that dramatically. Chris Cyborg has skills in all areas and elite skills really in all areas. Plus, she's also a vicious, vicious hitter. I want to believe that Tanya can work through it and take her down, because I still don't think Chris Cyborg is great off her back. I think if Tanya Evinger can consistently take Cyborg down, I don't think Cyborg's tapping her off the bottom. It's just whether she can consistently do it, and I don't think that will happen, mainly because to do it, she's just going to have to eat shots. And I think she can eat shots for a while, but eventually it's not easy to take Chris Cyborg down. And while she's doing that, Cyborg's going to get opportunities inside where she can work knees, take the wind out of it, lean on Evinger, just be bigger than Evinger, be more brutal, more skilled than her. Everything points to Cyborg, and you got to pick her. Over 3 rounds, I think I could have convinced myself to pick Evinger, even knowing she probably wouldn't win over 3 rounds. With 5 rounds, I got to assume that that's a lot of time for Cyborg's inherent advantages to show their class here. Super happy to have Tanya Evinger in the UFC. I think she's already a top 5 women's bantamweight and can give anybody in that division one hell of a fight. And I think she can at least make Cyborg work way more than she's had to work in her entire career. Very excited about this fight. Give me Chris Cyborg probably by 3rd round. I'm going to say 4th round because I was going to pick, because if it was a 3-rounder, I'd pick Evinger just out of spunk, but I'm going to say 4th round KO for Chris Cyborg. She's going to beat up Evinger a whole lot, probably in the 2nd and 3rd round. I think Evinger's going to win the 1st. I'm going to go out and say it. Evinger's going to take the 1st, shock everybody, because also, here's the thing. Cyborg is getting older. She's 32 now. She has had a strange career trajectory, a strange path, a lot of outside things going on, and eventually all this stuff sort of feels like it'd add up, and she might be overlooking Evinger, short notice. I think the short notice might even play to Evinger's advantage a little bit here, because she was still preparing for a fight, but this kind of new style as opposed to what Megan Anderson was bringing might make it a little more interesting. Give me Chris Cyborg by 4th round KO, but Evinger's going to take the 1st round.
It's funny because I think I said that yesterday at some point, because I agree. I do think that Evinger has a good shot to take the 1st round in this fight and surprise a lot of people. And to be honest, I kind of agree with you in the fact that if this was a 3-round fight, I would definitely give Evinger a chance, because I think she's overlooked by many. I think a lot of people just know who Cyborg is and don't know who Tanya is. So they go out there and say, oh, Cyborg is going to knock her out in the 1st round. Well, a lot of the opponents that Cyborg has knocked out in the 1st round aren't really the best competition in the world. But you mentioned Evinger's durability is one of the biggest things that has held her through pretty much her entire mixed martial arts career. She is very, very aggressive in the way that she likes to fight. She pushes forward, looks for the clinch, and then in the clinch, she's very good at controlling her opponents up against the cage. But I do think that Cyborg might be the strongest opponent. Probably is the strongest opponent that she's ever fought. So I don't know if Evinger is going to be able to control her up there against the clinch, but I do think that Evinger has a chance to maybe get a takedown in there as well. And I say that with a lot of hesitation, though, because Cyborg, she's been able to score some takedowns here and there in her mixed martial arts career too. And I don't recall her ever getting taken down in Strikeforce days or so far in the UFC, even though she's only fought twice. So I think Cyborg, from what I remember, I can't recall of her ever being on her back, but she probably has. Evinger's best chance is to be able to get her down to the ground. but I think that Cyborg's takedown defense might be there. And I think of this too. If you're Chris Cyborg, I feel like the only thing you would need to train on in this fight is keeping Evinger back with your punches and also try to avoid that clinch position, because the only thing that Evinger, I think, really has a chance in this fight to win is to try to grind out a decision and be crafty in that clinch. But Cyborg has the punching power. She's already got the striking advantage. I think that's really the only thing she needs to work on, knowing what Tonya Evinger does possess. Evinger hasn't lost in a long time, since 2011, and she's never been stopped by strikes. I do think that Cyborg, in the course of a 5-round fight, has the abilities to get a finish here. I picked a second-round TKO for Cyborg. I don't think it'll happen in the first. I do think that Evinger, as you mentioned, might be able to take that first round just because of her style. I think that Cyborg might struggle with a little bit, but I think that as the fight goes on, Chris Cyborg is going to be able to kind of do what she usually does and be able to get a finish. I think if you're going to pick Cyborg by a finish, probably like a fourth round might be a more realistic pick, but I'm just going to stick with what I initially picked when I saw this fight, and that was a second-round knockout for Chris Cyborg. But like I said, maybe later safer, just because Evinger is pretty durable, and she may be able to squeeze out a victory here. But it's I like also, I'll say one more thing, just not to prolong it, but I like what you said, Jed, with Chris Cyborg, this being the best opponent she's ever fought, like a legitimate, definite test that can definitely has the abilities, I think, to surprise some people. And I'm shocked a lot of people are just counting Tonya Evinger out. And I think it's mostly because a lot of people don't know who she is. But I'm going to stick with Cyborg because I'm very confident in a 5-round fight she gets the job done. But I'm going to stick with what I said as a second-round TKO.
Now, Tonya Evinger, she might be tough, but it simply doesn't matter. She might be the best fighter Chris Cyborg has ever fought, but it just doesn't matter. She's super tough. She's very good, but she's a lot smaller. Chris Cyborg has a huge strength advantage. She obviously has the striking advantage. Tonya Evinger needs to get her in the clinch and needs to get her down if she wants to have any sort of chance of doing so at all. Maybe she sneaks in a takedown. You guys have sounded fairly convincing, but I still don't think she makes it even close. I give her very little chance. Chris Cyborg is just a freaking animal. She is hellacious. She is incredibly good. And, people like to say she's the best women's fighter on the planet. The credentials make me think otherwise. She is incredibly good. She's incredibly dangerous.
She is undeniably not the best woman fighter on the planet by credentials. By
credentials.
I will fist fight the motherfucker who says her resume is better than Joanna Jędrzejczyk or Amanda Nunes, because that is wrong. She might be the most skilled, most talented. But you won't get an argument from me. I think that's debatable. But she hadn't beat any motherfucker out there, and that's not entirely her fault. There ain't people for her to beat, and the ones that could be are ducking her. Yeah. But there ain't no fucking chance her resume is better than Joanna or Amanda Nunes, or frankly better. Like, honestly, I know this will sound weird. Ronda's resume is better than hers. I know we all believe Cyborg would have beaten the fuck out of Ronda, but Ronda's resume is better than Cyborg's.
Oh, absolutely. That's not even close.
Straight up.
Chris Cyborg she's just going to destroy Tonya Evinger, and that's, maybe I'm looking past Tonya Evinger. Maybe I am not seeing something you guys see, but I just don't give her much chance at all. I don't think she's going to sneak around, and I think she's going to survive around just because Lena Landsberg did too. Chris Cyborg doesn't, just because Chris Cyborg destroys all her opponents doesn't mean it has to happen in 30 seconds. But I think sooner than later, Chris Cyborg rocks Tonya Evinger. I think she just mauls Tonya Evinger. She's not going to get taken down, I don't think, because she's so much stronger. She's so, physically, obviously so much bigger than Evinger, goes without saying. Chris Cyborg is an animal. She's incredibly good. Tonya Evinger is very good, but she's also good in the bantamweight division, and this is a huge step up. This is a step up I applaud her for taking, but it's not going to be pretty for her. Chris Cyborg, round 2 TKO, and that's all I got. All right, co-main event time. Tyron Woodley versus Damian Maia for the UFC Welterweight Championship of the World. T. Wood is defending his title for the third time. First time around, it was a draw. Got to beat the champ to beat the champ, apparently. And the second time around, it was a controversial decision win over Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Both fights weren't great. The first one we debated. I debated with Jed that the first one was decent. Second one, obviously terrible. Everybody believes so. Jed, Tyron Woodley, does he defend or does Damian Maia upset the UFC and gain and become the UFC welterweight champion?
Oh, I think we're all overthinking this one. Just straight up. Like, Damian Maia could win. There is an avenue for him to be victorious. I certainly hope he does. Not because I dislike Tyron Woodley. I quite like Tyron Woodley, actually. But because Tyron Woodley is the special type of fighter where if you told me that Maia pulled out and insert literally any top 20 welterweight and said, and that guy came in and beat Tyron Woodley, I would not be surprised. Conversely, if you told me that Tyron Woodley went on a 3-year undefeated streak and became the winningest welterweight champion in UFC history, I would not be surprised. He has a ton of tools in his belt. He is probably the second best athlete currently competing in the sport, behind one Yoel Romero, who is the greatest athlete to have ever competed in the sport. He has ridiculous power, excellent wrestling game, questionable cardio, but he's improved that by virtue of knowing what he lacks and operating around it. The thing is, he makes extremely befuddling tactical choices and strategic choices. Now, some of those pay off. The way he chose to fight Stephen Thompson ended up working out in his favor, and probably was a more effective strategy than anything else he could have done in general. But he also makes similar choices that led to him being out kickboxed by Jake Shields for what was predominantly a kickboxing match. There is anything can happen. Tyron Woodley might just fuck around and not throw a punch for 20 minutes. That is a thing he might do. His punch per minute ratio is ridiculously low. He just doesn't effectuate offense unless he feels very comfortable in doing so. And so he's sort of tried to turn into a counter puncher, and he has the physical acumen for that, but he hasn't developed all the technique needed for it yet. Against Damian Maia, he's never going to get an opportunity to counter punch because Damian Maia at this point basically only throws one punch. He throws a fake jab, which is a setup to his entry. He does not. And that's the thing. That's the thing about Maia here. He's been getting away with it too, but the book's out on how he sets up his entry. I am not breaking news by saying he flickers a jab out to have you react, and as soon as you react, he's on your hips. He has to develop something new here. Maybe he has. Maybe he just hasn't shown it because he hasn't needed to, but secretly he's got some new setup for whatever. But he's had very short time to prepare for this camp, and Tyron Woodley's an excellent defensive wrestler. Maybe Damian Maia comes in, flicks a jab, Tyron Woodley spazzes out, reacts, Maia gets on his leg and backpacks him and finishes a choke. So it's a thing that can happen because Damian Maia is a uniquely talented grappler, the best that has ever competed in the sport of MMA as far as in MMA. If you want to argue credentials, sure, other people have better jiu-jitsu credentials. Damian Maia is the best MMA grappler of all time, and I will hear no argument against that. Tyron Woodley could lose this fight. Straight up, he could lose a kickboxing fight to Damian Maia. He might not throw any punches, and Damian Maia might just sit around and kick him in the leg a bunch, and it'll be the worst fucking fight ever. Conversely, Maia could just jump on his leg, take his back, and do the damn thing. Or Tyron Woodley might just defend some takedowns, punch Damian once. Damian gets way too afraid of engaging, and then sort of does the Anderson Silva butt scoot thing where he just won't come within a goddamn yard of Tyron Woodley. Almost any way this fight goes, it's going to be misery to watch. This fight is extremely likely to just be awful to watch, with the potential to be awful until it ends violently or in a very quick, cool way. It seems much more unlikely to me that Maia gets 3 takedowns and finishes this, and because that's what he needs, or he needs to finish the submission. I think he could finish the submission. Seems unlikely, but possible, I suppose. Woodley's so good at defensive wrestling, and what Maia does is only loosely wrestling. A lot of it's chaining attacks, a lot of it's working that underhook sweep that he does when he comes in. But it's just Woodley's known he was going to probably have to fight Maia for a while. I feel like he's been preparing for it. Maia doesn't really have many ways to adapt his style as far as I can see. So unless Woodley really shits the bed here, always an option. I'm being very serious. It is completely within the realm of possibility that Woodley does nothing for 15 minutes and gives up 3 rounds to Demian Maia purely on the basis of Maia kicking him a bunch from 5 feet away. Like, that is a really, really within the realm of possibility here. I think if Maia can get one early takedown, if he can get a takedown the first round, I think it increases his chances in this fight dramatically. Not just because, well, he's in his world, but because, one, Tyron Woodley still has gas tank issues. He has mitigated that by pacing himself much better, by fighting very slowly, by not striking ever.
By not doing anything.
Yeah, by not doing anything. He's preserved a gas tank. It's a wonder how that works. And if Maia can get on top of him and make him work, that'll sap some of the energy from Woodley. And at the same time, it will also put the fear in Woodley. If he can get on Woodley early and take his back, then for the rest of the fight, now Woodley really has to be concerned about fucking up. Like, oh shit, I bit on his jab fake, and suddenly he was on my back, and then I had to play hell playing defense for the last 4 minutes. So if he can get an early win, I think his chances, or an early takedown, I think his chances go up dramatically. If he can't, I expect Tyron Woodley to win and either get a knockout in the middle of the fight, or just Demian Maia refuses to engage him, and it's one of the worst fights we've ever seen. I'm picking Tyron Woodley because all logic and reason say Tyron Woodley's going to win this fight. I super hope Demian Maia wins, both because he seems like an awesome dude in general, and the UFC could not be more clear that they want anything other than a Demian Maia champion. And it always makes me happy to know that Dana White is mad. So War Demian Maia, I hope you jiu-jitsu the fuck out of this guy.
I really enjoy both guys. To be honest, I don't really want either to lose because I really like both personalities that both have. But I guess when it comes down to a pick, my ultimate pick in the end has been in favor for Tyron Woodley, and for a couple different reasons. And I don't want to talk about it too long since we've gone on for quite a while, but the biggest thing that I've noticed between those two is that out of 19 Strikeforce and UFC fights, Tyron Woodley has only landed 5 takedowns and has only attempted 8. So he's been keeping the fight standing pretty much all of his Strikeforce and UFC career. Demian Maia, on the other hand, who I think has like 24, 25 UFC fights, he has looked for 189 takedowns and has landed 60 in that time, which is an absolutely absurd number. And that kind of goes off the point too, where we know what Demian Maia does. And you mentioned about adaptation. Demian Maia does not really adapt to any kind of new game plan. He uses that same game plan in every single fight, and I feel like Tyron Woodley may be prepared for that. Along with that, Tyron Woodley is a fantastic defensive wrestler, rarely gets taken down. I think he was only taken down once by Rory McDonald in their fight, but that was a while ago. Tyron Woodley has worked tremendously on his cardio too. Demian Maia also kind of has holes in his cardio, as we saw in the 5-round fight that he had with Ron LaFleur. In the 5th round, he just looked exhausted and was pretty much kept dropping down to the mat, trying to get the fight down there, but Ron LaFleur wanted nothing of it. I think that both of these two don't really have the best cardio, but I think it depends on how they implement the game plan. Maia gets tired when he tries to grapple too much and he can't get the submissions. He gets tired late. Tyron Woodley, he gets tired when he expels too much energy in a short period of time. It did pay off for him in that last fight. I do think that what we might see is Demian Maia pushing forward, using the same tactics that he does in every fight, and look for those takedowns and try to find the clinch. But I think Woodley's got the takedown defense, along with the counters, as you mentioned, Jed. The counters are one thing that Tyron Woodley has worked quite a bit on, and he's been able to pretty much capitalize on that in some of his fights, landing some pretty decent power shots, especially with that right hand that is not quite a bit of guys out with the counter. Especially the Josh Koscheck, but that's Koscheck. I do think that Woodley still has great combinations, though. I think that Maia's repetitiveness is good, but I think that Woodley might be smart enough if he's been able to think through the right game plan to be able to avoid what Maia does and land a counter to possibly knock out Maia. Maia has been stopped once before. Tyron Woodley has been stopped once before. And then Marquardt was the only guy to do that to both of these two. But Marquardt got Maia out a little quicker. I think Maia got kind of tagged a couple times against Masvidal. Woodley has been tagged a couple times here and there, but he's still got that power and explosiveness. And for the explosiveness reason, too, I'm going to be picking Woodley by a second-round knockout. But I do think, like Jed said, that this could be a pretty boring fight. If Woodley expels his energy too much and he can't finish Maia, I think we're going to see a slow-paced fight. And like you mentioned, Maia might be able to kickbox his way to a victory. Or if Maia can get the fight down early, maybe he can get a submission. But I'm going to stick with what I picked with, and that's Woodley by a second-round finish.
Now, you both said how, Damian Maia does the same thing every time, essentially. So Tyron Woodley should be able to game plan for that, and he knows what Maia wants to do. And he therefore should be able to defend more than, usual or whatever, and he should be able to have success there. But the one problem I see with that is that's the story for every Maia opponent. Jorge Masvidal knew what Damian Maia wanted to do, and look what happened. Carlos Condit knew what Damian Maia wanted to do, and look what happened. Gunnar Nelson knew what Maia wanted to do. Everybody knows what, or Neil Magny even. Everybody knows what Damian Maia wants to do to them, but no one can defend it. And Tyron Woodley, of course, is a very good wrestler. He's very good at defensive wrestling. But so was Jorge Masvidal. And Damian Maia, Damian Maia is good enough of a grappler to get even the best defensive wrestlers down to the mat. I truly believe it. The guy is the best MMA jiu-jitsu artist in the sport ever. He has, his grappling is incredible. His takedowns aren't anything special, but how different they are, how he enters, how he chains his offense together. It's really, really special. Tyron Woodley, his game is very bizarre because I feel like he's always looking for the counter, at least most recently, or more recently, I should say. I just don't feel like that's the right game plan for him. The guy should be an aggressive fighter. He should be going forward. And I honestly think he'd have more success that way. Maybe I should be saying that because he's a welterweight champion and he's looked all right. I mean, but look at the Robbie Lawler fight. If he did that to everybody, he would be very good, and he'd probably be the champion for a long time because no one can take that power. But when he stands back like he did against Wonderboy, I think I actually scored both of those fights for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I mean, you can argue the other way. You can argue a draw in both fights, but they're all, I just don't see Tyron Woodley. I mean, we all sort of talked about it. He's incredibly inactive, or he can be. And that could be something that simply loses him rounds just by itself, him not doing anything. If Damian Maia jumps on him in the first round and grabs a hold of him, even if Woodley defends and gets out and the horn rings and they go out for their break in between rounds, there's going to be a big confidence boost for Maia. And Woodley, what's going to be on his mind? Defend the takedowns. It already is, but even more so. He's not going to be worried as much about his offense, but as much as defending the takedowns. It's going to be right there in the back of his head all fight, and it's going to go downhill. Tyron Woodley has showed he can go 5 rounds in the past 2 fights with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, but I don't think, that's because his cardio is so much better than it once was. I just think that's because he didn't really do much, and he did just enough. But, Damian Maia on top of you is going to tire you out. A guy that has a suspect at gas tank with Maia on top of him, I truly believe if Maia does what Maia does, I think Tyron Woodley's going to gas out. I think he's going to be exhausted by the 5th round. Not to say Damian Maia is going to be fresh. Wes mentioned that, I remember the Maia fight with LaFleur a couple of years back, 2.5 years ago, and Maia was literally pulling guard because he couldn't stand up straight without falling over. He was that exhausted. My pick here is the challenger. I'm going with Damian Maia. I like him to win the title by decision. I don't think he gets Woodley out of there. I think Woodley's defense on the mat is good enough, but Maya's just so good at getting guys down and keeping them down. I think he's able to do that for at least 3 rounds. This fight, there are going to be times when it's on the feet, and it's going to kind of be like the Masvidal-Maia fight, where Masvidal is not doing enough. That sounds a lot like Woodley. Maia's obviously not doing anything on the feet. It's going to be boring, but I don't think Woodley catches him. He very well could, obviously, but my gut feeling is he does not. My gut feeling says Demian Maia takes him down, holds him down, looks for the submission, doesn't quite get it. Demian Maia and new UFC welterweight champion of the world, unanimous decision. There you go. Alrighty, main event time. Daniel Cormier, John Jones, the rematch. We've all been waiting for it. UFC 214. They've done, probably a dozen face-offs over the past 3 years, and they're fighting for the second time. Light heavyweight title is on the line. Jed, does Daniel Cormier remain the champion, or does Johnny Bones get back what was once his?
Come on, dog. We all know what's happening here. This is not – I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. I don't have much to say on this fight. We talked about it on the circus because we talked about a lot of things on the circus. I'm honestly not even that pumped about this fight, which is weird because there's a credible, even probable argument that this is the best fight in the history of the sport. We are talking about, at worst, the second best pound-for-pound fighter on the planet right now, and at worst, and that same fighter being at worst the third best fighter ever in the history of the sport by my calculations, certainly a top 5 best ever, versus the current light heavyweight champ, who himself should probably be, I don't know what he actually is, but is a top 5 pound-for-poundish fighter currently, and frankly, probably one of the 15, like not on accomplishment, but on actual skill set, he's one of the 10 best fighters ever. Like this is everything you want in mixed martial arts. This is everything you hope for if you are a fan like we're fans, not a dude who catches every once in a while catches UFC or whatever. Like the guy who watches the fucking shitty ass Glasgow cards at 4 a.m. or whatever. Like this is what you're in the game for. This is the best fight of the year, and will probably be the best fight of the year, unless maybe they do get the Ferguson Khabib fight to finally jump off. God, I hope so. It's a great fight, and at the same time, I don't have much interest in it because I know it's going to happen. The things in MMA that really get me going are when I'm not entirely sure, when there are avenues up for debate. I'm willing to be surprised here, and frankly, I hope that I am. But we saw this fight before, and it was a competitive fight. DC is close to John Jones's equal inside a steel cage. He really is. He's an elite level fighter, the likes of which we rarely see in this sport, but he is not. It was a competitive fight. It was not a particularly close fight. John Jones won 4 of the rounds. You can argue he won 5 of the rounds. I guess you can argue he only won 3 of the rounds. You can't really argue with any type of credibility that DC won the fight. It is, by all facets, John won the fight. DC won engagements and individual portions of it. He was always losing the war, even when he was winning battles. In that second round that he wins, he won with predominantly landing uppercuts in the clinch. There's some other stuff happened, but really his best work was uppercuts in the clinch, and that's a good weapon for him to have. While he was doing it, he also got kneed like 400 times in the goddamn gut, and so he slowed down substantially as the fight went on. He won the battle and he lost the war in that instance, and he lost all the other battles and lost the war everywhere else. On top of all of this, on top of the fact that we've seen this, it's just a bad fight for him. Like, it's a terrible stylistic matchup for him, outside of the fact that John is one of the best athletes that have ever graced the cage, and that he's one of the most creative, savant-like minds in MMA. Like, where John is probably the best clinch fighter in the sport, probably the best clinch fighter in the history of the sport. I think Demetrius Johnson has a credible argument to be in that conversation with him, but we're talking those two guys are miles away from everybody else that plays a clinch game in this sport. And DC is a great clinch fighter. It's his best area of competition, realistically. I mean, he's Olympic, two-time Olympic or whatever, but really where he excels is roughing dudes up inside, or at least that's where he's excelled predominantly in his MMA game. So basically, DC's best area is a wash at best with John Jones. DC is a elite level wrestler. He can't credibly or reliably take John Jones down. He can accomplish it. He can't do it with regularity. So his best avenues of success, he is at a wash with the guy he is competing with, which means he has to be competitive in those areas and he has to find ways to win in the other areas. And it is hard for me to envision, like, he's a credible boxer, but how does he outbox John Jones when John Jones has like a 12-inch reach advantage on him? Like, he can't get in. He has to fight at a very specific distance. If he is all the way in on John, even though he is good in the clinch, over the course of 25 minutes, he's probably losing those engagements in total. He might win some of them, but he is losing most of them because John is bigger, has more leverage, and has more tools. John can work knees to the body. He's creative, can work elbows. He has those stupid ass long arms that can lock up a choke. DC has much more limited areas, and we saw the battles in the clinch play out that while DC won a few of them, John ended up winning more. So he can't be all the way in and he can't be all the way out because then he's just going to get oblique kicked and maybe jabbed a bunch because his arms are short and John is go-go gadget. So he has to be fighting here. He has to be inside of John Jones's actual striking range, but outside of the actual clinch. It is a very narrow distance he has to be maintaining to work his combination boxing game. And I don't see how he can reliably do that because he doesn't really have the footwork to do that. And I don't see how he can maintain that range because also John's super creative and will just be like, oh, I can't punch you. I'm going to hit you with these vicious fucking elbows. There's just no avenues to victory for him. He is going to have to cobble together a game plan built around basically gaming the system. I spent a lot of time today trying to think how DC wins this fight. And like I said, it's a competitive fight. But the best way I can figure is he has to spend a round trying to stay far fucking away and kick John's legs. He has to do it a lot. And he had some success with that in the first fight, but he quit because John caught a kick and took him down. He has to not be afraid and be willing to be taken down and just pop right the fuck back up. He has to work the legs, and he has to basically never try and punch John in the head for the entire 25 fucking minutes. He has to strike exclusively to the body to try and slow John down because when John works knees to the body, it is going to slow Daniel down. And Daniel is going to slow down before John anyway. It's a harder weight cut for him. He carries more baggage. He is going to have to spend 3 rounds just banking body and leg work and hope that John slows down enough that then maybe this becomes a competitive fight and he's won at least 2 of the first rounds and only has to snag one of the later rounds with clinch tactics, with a late takedown. He has to fight a almost perfect fight while shooting the fucking moon here. And I just don't think he can do it. The last thing I'll say, because I ended up rambling for a while here, everybody, and I addressed this on the circus with you, Nick, everybody points to John's last fight. Maybe it's ring rust will be a factor here. I don't tend to believe that that's a huge thing for fighters like John, but he will have not fought for a year. In his last fight, he looked really bad. I firmly don't believe that John looked bad in his last fight. I think he looked fine. I think he took on one of the most stylistically challenging fights for him on like 9 days notice, a guy who can match his physicality, which is one of the things John has enjoyed over almost everybody he's fought, just a sheer physical advantage over them. And OSP can match his physicality, is a weird heavy hitting dude with like funky ass sub game. And so John was preparing to fight a stocky wrestler with a relatively straightforward boxing game. Like it's apples to oranges, and he adjusted to that fight on 9 days notice by winning every single round and looking like he never got out of second gear, really. Like he just found a comfort zone and stayed in it out of deference to the risk that a fighter like OSP kind of presents to him. So I just don't think that's a bad thing. I think John is old, and we might start seeing a decline of John more than people are expecting, but I just don't think it matters. I think this is a good stylistic matchup for him, and it's unfortunate because DC is, I think, one of probably the 10 or 15 best fighters ever, and I don't think he'll ever get that credit because he's going to lose twice to one of, if not the best fighters that we've ever seen.
Man, I don't even know if I have really anything else to add. Because, I mean, you nailed it spot on the head. Pretty much everything is that I feel like we could see is going to be probably similar to what we will see. And I'm talking about the first fight that these two had. On my ultimate pick in the end is Jon Jones, and pretty much for everything, the reasons that Jed said. I like Daniel Cormier. I think he's a great person. I think he gets a lot of over the top hate, but Jon Jones is an unbelievable athlete, and it's hard to pick against somebody who still has who's never lost a mixed martial arts fight in his career. And Jon Jones is still so technical in what he puts together. Daniel Cormier's best avenue, Jed, you mentioned it, the leg kicks. And also trying to look for takedowns, because Cormier is very, very, I don't know what you could say. He's got good top control when he gets opponents down. And I don't know if Jon Jones is going to be able to, or I don't know if Cormier is going to be able to score those takedowns. And if he can't, which I don't think he can, but then again, Cormier's wrestling has still looked pretty fantastic, especially in these last few fights. But and he's shown quite a bit of durability. But Jon Jones is one of the other best defensive wrestlers. Probably when you look at all the fighters who are 100 and maybe 170 pounds up, he's got to be the best one, right? I mean, it's amazing to see how well he's able to put everything together. I think everything that Jed mentioned, along with the reach advantage that Jon Jones is going to have, and the fact that we already saw somebody get the victory, Jon Jones, in the first fight, I think we might see a lot of similarities here. There's the only unknowns that I think of that could maybe give Daniel Cormier the victory are the fact that, one, Jon Jones has only fought once since since defeating Daniel Cormier, which was back in 2015, and that was the OSP fight almost a little over a month ago. And then seeing Jon Jones' physique, I don't know how that's going to play a factor in the fight, depending on his conditioning and stuff, but definitely carrying a lot more muscle mass, which can play a factor with his strikes and power. But then again, like I said, that conditioning, and maybe later on he gets tired because he's just carrying around so much extra pound. I don't really know. I'm just going to end it there. My pick in the end is Jon Jones. I haven't picked by decision. Maybe Cormier can squeeze something out, knowing the fact that he's been pretty active and has been beating some decent competition, but I think that Jon Jones is going to get it done.
I've been having weird feelings that DC somehow finds the road to victory, but no, at the end of the day, my head is all day Jon Jones. There's just no way Daniel Cormier beats Jon Jones. Daniel Cormier is one of the best fighters. Your mic is muted. I don't know if you're saying something or not, but
go with your gut, motherfucker.
Nah, I do that sometimes, but can't do it here. Jon Jones is gonna get the job done, and it's in a way unfortunate just because Daniel Cormier, as Jed spoke about, is never gonna get the credit he deserves. He realistically is one of the better fighters we've ever seen, and he's always going to be known as the guy who lost to Jon Jones twice, the guy who held the title while Jon Jones was away. And that sucks, but that's the reality of the sport and the reality of this rivalry. Jon Jones will always get the better of DC no matter what, whether he's getting the better of him in the trash talk or prep or whatever. Jon Jones is naturally, he's naturally gifted, and so is DC, but Jon Jones, in a different way. Genetics, he always talks about how genetic-wise he, got the wrong end of that for his legs. But in general, the guy has incredible genes, how big he is. He's incredibly tall. He's incredibly strong. And not to say DC isn't, but the size will play a big part in this fight. Jon Jones is one of the best clinch artists, maybe the best. I think the only one who can argue with that is Demetrius Johnson, the flyweight champion. Jon Jones will work Daniel Cormier's body. It'll slow DC down. Knees, even kicks to the body, punches to the body. Jon Jones is incredible in the clinch. And at range, Jon Jones all day. Jon Jones has a big reach advantage. He'll be able to kick. Front kicks to Cormier's chest and keep Cormier off of him. Cormier, if he wants to beat Jon Jones, I don't mind the tactics of chopping up Jones's legs. I think that could be effective, but he needs to close the distance. And I know that won't work well because Jones is incredibly good in the clinch, but he needs to take John Jones down. I don't think he will. If he does somehow squeak in one takedown, I think it'll be early. I think it'll be in the first round. And I think John Jones gets up right away.
If Cormier, both of you guys said this, so I will address it. If Cormier tries to take John Jones down in the first 10 minutes, he's lost the fight. If he succeeds in getting him down, which is extremely unlikely, then okay. But if he doesn't, he is just burning gas. It is only a good move if he succeeds. If not, he is sacrificing his his opportunities. He needs to either try and catch a kick and take him down, or basically just give the fuck up.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're sort of just spitballing as far as what Cormier can really do to beat John Jones, and at the end of the day, it's very little. I mean, as you said, he needs to have a perfect night, and he needs John Jones to not have a perfect night. And for both those two things to happen, and for DC to do everything exactly as needed and exactly right, and John to mess up somewhere and make a mistake or ring rust, it doesn't all add up. It doesn't all add up. Not all of that will happen. Maybe we don't see the best John Jones, but I don't think it matters. John Jones doesn't have to be at his 100% best to beat Daniel Cormier. And that's just how good John Jones is. And in general, people share that idea, but I think because John Jones is maybe not the nicest person around, some people like to not credit Jones enough, but he is one of the best fighters on the planet, pound for pound of all time. Whatever the argument is, he is at the top of the list or just below the top. DC is right there up with him, but as I said, DC will always be known as the guy who lost twice to John Jones and Jones's best rival, and maybe even Jones's toughest fight. But when I say toughest fight, that means it's competitive, not really close. I think this looks a lot like the first fight. Not, times has changed other than there's the idea that John Jones had to ring rust, but I don't mind Jed's sort of idea that the OSP fight, well, he did what he had to do, and there's no reason to do more. And it wasn't the greatest matchup for him. John Jones has always done well against guys not his size, and that's why Alexander Gustafsson gave him the toughest fight of his career, because he was the size of John Jones, give or take an inch or two. John Jones is going to beat Daniel Cormier. That's really all there is to it. He's going to decision Daniel Cormier. I don't see a finish happening. Cormier is super tough, and yeah, I mean, he's going to survive all 5 rounds, but he's going to get tired. John Jones will get slightly, but not nearly enough as much as Cormier. Get close early, but once we hit the 3rd round, and then if DC hasn't done anything special, it's just John Jones all day from there on out. John Jones, a very comfortable decision win, is my pick to become the new UFC light heavyweight champion. Alrighty, that does it for UFC 214. Let's move on and to give out our bonuses. Wes, we'll start with you. Fight of the night and performances of the night. Who do you got?
I feel like that this is going to be one of those fight of the nights that we will see not get the bonus, even though it was probably deserving, but it's not going to get it because the names that are in the main event, and also the fact that Robbie Lawler, Donald Cerrone's on the card. But my pick for fight of the night is definitely Ricardo Lamas versus Jason Knight. I think that that's a guaranteed fight of the night, and I think it'll definitely go the 15 minutes. My 2 performances, I'm going to give one to – I should have had them up just to see what I had. I'll give one to Tyron Woodley. I feel like if Tyron can finish Damian, he'll get a bonus, or if Damian can finish Tyron, he'll get a bonus. But my pick is Woodley by knockout, so I'll take Woodley for a bonus. And I'll give my other one to Robbie Lawler because I think he'll be able to stop Donald Cerrone.
And Jed?
Oh, I'm doing the only thing. I think, look, Wes is very reasonable when he says Lamas Knight. I think that's a gangbusters fight on many cards. That might be your fight of the night. Hell, maybe it is the fight of the night tonight. I'm avoiding that because I have the image of the Kawajiri fight, which was not the fight of the night for Jason Knight. Similarly, Robbie Lawler versus Donald Cerrone. I think most people, that probably even is your odds-on favorite as fight of the night. That fight looks like it will be sensational. I'm avoiding it for 2 reasons. One, I think both guys might be a little past their prime. Maybe this fight ends much earlier than we expect because of that. And two, because one thing I think we should all have learned now, main events or really 5-round fights, just wildly disadvantaged to get the fight of the night honors. You just have more rounds for more action to happen.
And that is why you're picking Tyron Woodley versus Damian Maia.
Incorrect. The first time Cormier and Jones fought, it was fight of the night. I still think it'll be competitive. I think Cormier might have worked on some tricks to give John Jones maybe more trouble. I still think John's going to win at least 3 rounds, probably 4. But I think Cormier will let everybody know he was in there, that he didn't get his doors blown off. He was competitive throughout. It'll be my fight of the night and probably one of the better fights of the year, which has been a pretty low year as far as fights go.
All right. Well,
performance bonuses. Shit, I forgot about those. Manuwa and Lawler. Manuwa's going to knock out Ozdemir, and I think Lawler's going to scorch up Donald Cerrone with a body shot. I'm picking those guys mostly because I'm relatively confident in the outcomes there, and the other people that I might give performance bonuses, I'm much less confident that they get stoppages.
Now, I like that we're all different on fight of the night. Mine goes to the other only reasonable option, and that is Robbie Lawler versus Donald Cerrone. The concerns are the fact that both guys can get knocked out early, and that's a very reasonable outcome to this fight. I'm banking on it, and I truly think we're going to see a hell of a fight. I think it's going to be back and forth. I think it's going to be exciting and one of the best fights all year. And maybe that's just me, wishful thinking, but we'll see how that plays out. Obviously, Jones, Cormier could very easily get it at 5 rounds. It was fight night the first time out. No reason to think it won't be fun. But it goes to Lawler Cerrone for me, and my performances go to Chris Cyborg to knock out Tanya Evinger and Jimmy Manuwa to knock out Volkan Ozdemir.
Oh, shit. Cyborg's a better pick than Lawler, but
Are you changing?
I'll give it to you. Nope.
All right.
I'm already in my boat. I'll live in it, but that's a better pick.
And according to you, Tanya Evinger is probably going to make it close, so maybe Chris Cyborg isn't the better pick.
I think she's going to make it close for a minute. I just think Cyborg is eventually going to do something super violent. Yeah. So I think you've got the best performance picks, of my humble opinion.
All righty. With that, let's move on to DraftKings. Jed, we'll start with you. Who are your 6 fighters for your UFC 214 DraftKings team?
Fuck you, Nick. We'll start with you. Who are your 6 fighters?
Well, I started with you
because all big and bad over here. Like you think you're going to win the DraftKings. I think the champ should get to go last.
All right, that's fair.
Like Jeopardy.
Exactly. Champion's advantage. So in case I like your team better, I can last minute change.
All right. If you want to, yeah. I mean, I guess you can change, and you're going to use my team if you're concerned about changing or whatnot.
I feel pretty good about my team actually. The team I wanted that's not physically possible to make, so I feel pretty good about my team.
All right. Well, here we go. I got Damian Maia. Jed's already sold that he's going to win. So I got Damian Maia. I got Johnny Bones Jones. I got Robbie Lawler, Jason the Kid Knight, Renan Barão, and Andre Touchy Fili.
Well, it's not terrible.
It's adequate.
It's a fine team. It might give me a run for my money. Wesley, how about you, sir?
I'll give mine. The biggest risk that I have on my team is Volkan Ozdemir. But I do think one of those two is going to be – I think one of those two can get a knockout. And we've seen Jimmy knocked out before, and seeing Ozdemir have 10 first-round knockouts, I mean, it was tempting with the other people I picked. But Volkan's on my team. Alexandra Albu. I have Renan Barão, Brian T.C. Ortega, Chris Cyborg, and John Jones.
Wes, I'm not going to lie. I hate your team. It's I would not trade for your team at all. I do think Nick's team is okay. But here's the winner, boys and girls. For all you fans out there, remember, 2 in a row I've won. If you're going to be doing the DraftKings, probably want to tail me here. I'm going to start with the gems, the centerpieces of the team, the filet mignon. Like my good colleague Wes Riddle, I also built my team around the fact that John Jones is going to win and probably score near 100 points in doing so. Similarly, Chris Cyborg is going to win and score somewhere near 100 points in doing so. But both of those people are expensive. How do you offset that expense? Well, with a couple of underdogs. I happen to be picking 2 underdogs on this card, Burrell and Erik Sheldon. And thus, I've got both of them on my teams. I really like both of their chances in those fights in general. So I certainly like their chance to get a goodly amount of points. I think there's actually a really strong chance Burrell ends up getting the knockout there, just because Joe's going to be in a situation where he's forced to strike with a dude and put himself in really bad spots. And I round my team out with Moicano. I am Carnero. Renato Carnero Moicano, there we go. Couldn't just blank on the name. Who I have to get what I am the only one to pick him over Brian Ortega. But like I said, I think he can just kind of pile up points on Ortega, who will sleepwalk and not try until the last 5 minutes. So if Moicano can survive 5 minutes, I think he's going to win. Other than that, I had to round out my team. This is the only pick I'm not in love with here. Kaylin Curran.
Oh, I was about to say it. That's terrible.
Kaylin Curran rounds out my team, but I don't feel that bad because I had to offset some of my more expensive ones. And she's fighting a woman who has 2 professional fights and hasn't competed in the last 2 years. Plus, even when she loses, she actually tends to get a decent amount of points because she's shoots takedowns frequently. I think that there's look. We talked about it. Albu, we don't know a damn thing about Albu. And Kaylin Curran might just dick around, shoot a takedown, and tap her out. I got Kaylin Curran rounding out my team. I really wanted to find a way to get the trifecta of Jones, Manua, and Cyborg, but there's just no real functional way to do it. You had to take on a lot of really bad fighters, like guys who you would have to have Qatar on your team. And I can't put Qatar on my team.
Qatar, Josh Burkman.
Yeah, basically you had to have like 2 of Qatar, Josh Burkman, and Cormier. Like you had to, but I don't want Cormier since I'm already picking Jones. Like it's a bad run. So I couldn't get Manua, even though I like Manua's chances to get a lot of points with a knockout here. That's my team. I feel pretty confident going up against you fellas, but I guess we will see when I get to retain the title for 3 in a row.
Thank you, Wes, for that. The inserting love. Jed, I want to put $10 on the line. Me and you.
Oh,
you want to put champ?
Oh, you want to put $10 on the line?
$10 on the line.
Do you want to just put it? Do you just want to do a heads up DraftKings account? I actually have money in my DraftKings account.
No, because I don't have any, and I don't feel like putting any in it.
Then how are you gonna give me $10 when I win?
Do you have PayPal?
I don't think so. Do you have Venmo in Canada? Is that a thing?
I've never heard of it.
We'll discuss off air. I could be convinced. What's your team again? My ain't doing shit.
Well, I mean, Wes,
a lot of points though.
Not to offend you, Wes, but I excluded you from that just because I mean, me and Wes sort of both agree that your team, Albu, Ortega.
He just threw massive shade at you. I just don't like your team because I think Ozdemir and Ortega are both losing.
Yeah,
but
it's kind of bad.
Ortega.
It's bad of me that Wes, like literally right after he's like sending me love, I just like trash on his team. But hey,
it's pretty savage.
Well, I mean, I've never been good at DraftKings.
I think.
I mean, if you want to do $10, if you wanted to do $10, I'm game. I mean, I like money, so.
Once I win, like. Yeah, if I can actually win in DraftKings.
Let's make it 5 for you, Wes. We'll get you involved. Everybody throwing 5 in DraftKings.
I'm throwing down $5 in Monopoly money while you guys throw down the real bills.
That doesn't sound appropriate, but we'll take it. We'll accept your offer.
All right. So that means if Wes wins, he's not risking anything except for a missing piece in his Monopoly board game.
You better give me that cash, that
He's
Monopoly money.
He ain't gonna win shit, so it's fine.
But knowing all of this now, Ozdemir is going to pull off the miraculous upset that he has in his past 2 fights. Ortega is going to be
miraculous if he punches Jimmy Manuwa and Manuwa falls over. That's not outside the realm of possibility.
It's still
that's the only reason I picked him.
And look, Albu could beat Kaylin Curran because Kaylin Curran is not a good fighter.
Yeah.
That's the exact reason I picked Albu.
His team has that thing where, like, I can see it working. I don't like it because he's picked 3 fighters I am picking to lose, I think. No, he's only picked 2 fighters I'm picking to lose. But it could totally work out. Like, I could see him just being like, fuck you, 600 points.
All right, well, to legitimize this, we have to decide on air. Wes, $5 or no?
Pass.
All right. Jed, is it on?
I'm no coward. $5. Let's do it.
All right. Well,
I can't be talking all this shit and then back out. So
Exactly. I knew I'd catch you. Anyways, that is it for episode 77 of Before the Battle. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. Thank you, Jed and Wes, for joining me on this wonderful Thursday night, as always. Jed lets people know where they can find you on social media, where you can find your writing, your podcast, and most importantly of all, your interesting conversation with Brandon Gibson, and anything else you'd like to plug.
I didn't even mention it when I was breaking down the fight. I didn't forget. I just opted not to. You can find me on Twitter at JEDKMESHEW. You should give me a follow on there. You should also follow Naked Truth MMA, spelled just like one would think Naked Truth MMA would be spelled. That is the name of my podcast. I co-host with The Naked Gambler, a writer for BloodyElbow.com, where the esteemed Nicholas Baldwin also works. This week we spoke with Brandon Gibson for about 20 minutes ahead of UFC 214, where he will be cornering, and did a lot of prep work with both Donald Cerrone and John Jones. It was a great conversation because he didn't know what the fuck to do, because he called us up and was like, hey fellas, I don't have a plan for how to beat Daniel Cormier because he's a really good fighter, and John is not a great fighter. He's only number 7 pound for pound. He's only the number 1 light heavyweight, not the champion. So I need some tips. What do you guys got? And we did a free consultation service. Well, not free, but we did a consultation service for him on air so everybody could listen. A lot of good gyms in there. You should totally check that out. Other than that, my writing's at MMAfighting.com. I've been on vacation for this last week, but I will be back starting on Monday, and I'm very excited to do so. Thanks. Give me a follow. Talk to you later, guys.
Wesley, where can the people find you on social media? Where can they find your writing and anything else you would like to plug?
Now that I'm out of my summer school class, I'm going to be able to write a little bit more over at MMAsucker.com, and you can find me on Twitter at allthatMMA.
Alrighty, you guys can find me on the Twitter at Nick Baldwin MMA. You can find my writing over at BloodyElbow.com. You can find my other podcast I hosted part-time with Andrew the Clown Kid Lawrence, part-time with Jed Meshew. It is called The MMA Circus. You can find it on iTunes, Stitcher Podcast, Google Play, and just about anywhere else you may look for a podcast. This week we had a number of guests. Episode 121. It was dropped on Wednesday, so that was yesterday. We had 5 fantastic guests. We had Olawale Bamboshe. We had Andre Fili, who fights this weekend at UFC 214. We talked about him. He's on my DraftKings team. He's going to make me $5 from Jed Meshew. We also had Nick Lentz on the program. We had Derek Campos and Brandon Gertz, who fought each other earlier this month, Fight of the Year candidate. That is it. Jed and I talked about UFC 214 and recapped Weidman versus Gastelum, UFC on Fox 25 this past weekend. That is all I have. Thank you, as always, for watching. Thank you, Jed and Wes, for the time, as always. Enjoy the fights on Saturday, UFC 214, T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Watch it. It'll be fun. Enjoy the fights. Talk to you later.
Love you guys.